What if the smallest Lannister was never small? What if Tyrion Lannister was never a dwarf? Let's explore the depths of it in this video. The halls of Casterly Rock fall silent as Lady Joanna draws her last ragged breath. The birthing is still long and laborious, still a trial of blood and torn flesh, still the price a mother pays for a son. Maesters whisper to one another. Servants hover at the edges of the chamber, and outside the tower window the sea crashes against the rock as if beating time to a dying heart. Yet when the child is lifted, the gasps are not of horror, but of astonishment. He has his siblings' same golden hair, same clear green eyes, and the same wail that rattles the stone. His limbs are straight, his spine unbowed, his body whole. Joanna dies, as in the world that is known, but the son who killed her is not a twisted dwarf. He is, in every visible way, the perfect third lion of House Lannister. Tywin stands in the doorway, a father made of iron and grief. The loss of Joanna brands the boy in his mind, yet there is no public shame to hide, no malformed heir to tuck away behind jokes and cruelties. In this Westeros, in this single altered moment, the Lord of Casterly Rock looks upon a child who could ride at the head of an army, inherit the castle, and sit the high seat beneath the roaring lion. The burden remains the same. A son who cost him his wife. The shape of that burden, however, has changed completely. From this change, the Seven Kingdoms begin to tilt. A tall, handsome Tyrion will still chase knowledge in the shadows of the library, still reach for wine and words when steel fails him, still live under a father who withholds love and praise because Joanna's absence haunts every corridor. Yet as he grows up, the world cannot dismiss him as a monster in jest. Lords must reckon with him as a possible heir. Soldiers must measure him as a commander, and every insult must be whispered softer behind thicker doors. This only grows when the Iron Throne looms larger over every Lannister decision. A perfect third son changes how Tywin plots, how Cersei sees, how Jaime understands his own place. If Tyrion is never visibly broken, does he become the realm's greatest statesman, the cool mind that might have ended the War of the Five Kings before it began, or its most dangerous lion, armed now with charm, legitimacy, and a hunger for acceptance that no victory can fill? Remove his dwarfism, and the map of alliances, betrayals, and battles begins to redraw itself. His trial, his exile, his bond with Daenerys, even the fate of King's Landing itself, all bend around this single altered birth. In this series, the tale will be rewoven scene by scene, from that silent birthing chamber in Casterly Rock to the shadow of the Iron Throne, following every ripple of what happens when the smallest Lannister is never small at all. Welcome to the alternate Westeros we're about to build that is the path this story will follow now. Not a loose collection of wild possibilities, but a deliberate analytical journey through an alternate Game of Thrones timeline. This is not a tale that abandons canon so much as it walks beside it, measuring each step against the world that already exists, and asking, with care and precision, what truly changes when the lion cub is born whole. The structure is simple, but the path is long. The tale will move chronologically, beginning with Tyrion's birth and the death of his mother, then passing through his lonely childhood in the castle, his early bond and rivalry with Jaime and Cersei, the cruel lesson of Tysha, and his uneasy rise as a potential heir. From there, the frame of the War of the Five Kings will return. The hands chain across the Blackwater, the poisoned wedding, the trial that breaks him, and the exile that remakes him across the narrow sea, all the way to Daenerys, Slaver's Bay, and the final struggle for the Iron Throne. At each of these stops, the method will remain the same. First, the canon moment will be recalled as it stands. The mocked dwarf in the royal court, the despised son denied praise and responsibilities, the man whose body becomes an excuse for every insult. Then that moment will be twisted, carefully, under a single altered assumption. Tyrion is physically normal, a Lannister in height and build, yet still the son whose birth killed Joanna, still the child on whom Tywin places his grief. He looks like an heir, but as he grows up he feels neither love nor acceptance from his father, and this tension between appearance and reality will be the engine that drives each divergence. Because of that, the focus will not be on dragons appearing from nowhere, or prophecies invented for spectacle. It will be on emotional stakes and political logic. How does a respected, visibly perfect son change Tywin's plans for succession? How does the absence of open mockery alter Tyrion's wit, his hunger for knowledge, his instinct to side with broken things? This only grows when his relationships are reconsidered one by one. Shae, who might see a prince rather than a monster. Sansa, who might receive not a forced protector, but a plausible consort. Varys, who must weigh a different kind of threat. Daenerys, who meets not a bitter outcast, but a seasoned commander who continues to bargain with cities and sellswords. The tone will remain measured, the pacing steady. Each scene building on the last like stones laid into a new foundation beneath the same old castle. There will be room for quiet moments of reflection, for the cold logic of councils and contracts, and for the slow corrosion of a son who craves acceptance and finds only duty. To begin, the story must return to the place where everything fractures. The halls of Casterly Rock fall silent again, torches guttering in the drafts from the western sea, servants waiting outside a single door. Behind it, Joanna Lannister lies dying, and in the blood and the candlelight, a crying child is placed in Tywin's arms. The room is the same, the mother is the same, the father is the same. Only the body of the boy is different, and from that difference the fate of kingdoms will shift. It is back to that birthing chamber in Lannisport that the tale now descends. A different birth, Joanna's death, a perfect son, and a broken father. The birthing chamber at Casterly Rock stinks of blood and beeswax. The candles gutter in their iron sconces as if the stone itself is holding its breath, while midwives move in a blur of red-stained linen and whispered prayers, their hands slick, their faces drawn tight with a fear they dare not name. Outside, in the corridor lined with lion banners and cold torches, Tywin Lannister stands utterly still. His armor is gone, his crimson cloak discarded. He wears only black and gold, yet there is something funereal in the way the cloth hangs from his rigid shoulders. Servants press themselves to the walls. Maesters murmur about difficult labors and torn flesh, but the father does not move, does not speak, does not ask. The only sound that reaches him is Joanna's hoarse screaming, rising and falling until it frays into a wet, rattling gasp. Inside, Joanna's world has narrowed to the bed and the pain. The sheets are soaked, the rushes beneath her feet already dark with blood. Each contraction is a breaking wave, and with each wave she gives a little more of herself to the child, forcing its way into the world. The midwives trade glances, one reaching for a basin, another for more cloth. A maester counts her pulse and does not like what he finds. Yet even as her strength ebbs, Joanna clings to one thought: that this last child might live, that the price might be worth paying. When the boy comes, he comes in a rush. There is a final scream, a tearing, and then a thin wail cuts through the chamber like a knife. For a heartbeat, everyone freezes. Then the midwives move again, brisk and efficient, swaddling the small, red, furious creature that kicks against the air as if it already resents the world it has inherited. This is Tyrion Lannister, not twisted or stunted, not the stunted dwarf of another telling, but a tiny lion cub, with all his limbs straight, his spine unbroken, his skull round and whole beneath the damp mat of pale gold hair. His features are swollen with birth, yet in the set of his nose, the curve of his mouth, there is a hint of future beauty, the echo of his mother's face and his brother's easy charm. He has his siblings' same golden hair, same green-flecked eyes, and the same wail that rattles the hall. The maesters bend over him, probing gently, listening, testing. They whisper to one another that his lungs are strong, that his grip is fierce, that his heart beats steady and sure. There is no twisted leg to blame, no monstrous brow, no visible curse to hang this night upon. The boy is healthy, normal, even strong. In another life, this would be the moment of celebration, the moment of praise and wine and laughter echoing through the castle. Instead, the door opens and the world tilts. Tywin steps inside to the smell of iron and the silence that follows a storm. Joanna lies still, her skin already taking on that waxen, distant quality that makes the living step back. Her eyes are closed, her chest does not rise. Whatever words he might have saved for her are now ash in his throat. A midwife, shaking, places the child in his arms. Tyrion's first breath meets his mother's last, his tiny hands clutching at the air between them as if some part of him already understands what has been taken. The weight is nothing, barely a few pounds of flesh and heat. Yet in Tywin's grip it feels immense, an anchor tied to a corpse. There is no relief on his face, no joy, no softening. Only the dawning, hardening belief that this perfect son, this flawless little heir, has stolen something that can never be returned. As he grows up, he will never hear his father say it aloud, but the judgment is passed in that instant, silent and absolute. The maesters murmur that the boy is blessed, that the gods have spared him, that House Lannister stands secure. Tywin hears only the echo of Joanna's last scream. He continues to stare at the child, seeing not a gift, not acceptance or love, but a living debt he cannot forgive. This only grows when the years begin to turn, and the boy starts to smile with Joanna's mouth. Outside, the rock prepares for mourning and for feasting in the same breath. Inside, a father holds a perfect son and feels neither love nor acceptance. And in that quiet, with the candles burning low and the lions on the walls watching, the first crack in House Lannister's golden armor forms, a hairline fracture that will widen with every step this child takes toward his destiny. The beautiful murderer, Tywin's love that never arrives outside, the rock prepares for mourning and for feasting in the same breath. Inside, a father holds a perfect son and feels neither love nor acceptance, and this only grows when the days turn into weeks and the child begins to smile. As a toddler, Tyrion is all Lannister gold. His hair curls bright against Joanna's old cushions. His eyes mirror Jaime's easy warmth, and when he laughs, the servants glance at one another in quiet wonder. In the echoing halls of the castle, maids whisper that the gods have given Tywin a second Jaime, a little lion with quick hands, quicker questions, and a smile that wins over cooks and grooms and guards alike. He toddles after his brother in the yard, wooden sword dragging, already mocking the clumsy swings of older boys with a sharp tongue that draws startled laughter. To the servants, he is charming. To the guards, he is promising. To the visiting septon, he is a clever child who remembers every line of a lesson. But in Tywin's mind, he is one thing only, the murderer. The word never leaves his lips, yet it coils behind every glance. He watches the boy's golden head bent over a carved lion toy and thinks of Joanna's hair spread across blood-soaked sheets. He hears that bright, eager chatter and remembers the silence after her last breath. The body is flawless, the features noble. But the wound in the father has already hardened into judgment. As he grows up, Tyrion learns quickly what his father will and will not give. Tywin speaks to him of duties, of accounts and bannermen, of the weight of Casterly Rock and the responsibilities of an heir, even while Jaime still stands before him in shining mail. He talks of reputation, of the family name, of what Tyrion must do to be useful. He never speaks of love. He never speaks of forgiveness. When the boy tries once to ask whether his mother would have been proud, Tywin's gaze turns to stone and the question dies in his throat. At feasts, the contrast is cruelly clear. Lords from lesser houses raise cups and praise Tywin for his 3 fine children, the golden heir in white steel, the beautiful daughter with a queen's poise, and the youngest son, bright and handsome, already trading jests with men twice his age. Tywin accepts the compliments with practiced courtesy, but his eyes linger coldly on Tyrion, measuring, never admiring. The realm sees a perfect set of lions. The father sees an instrument, a debt unpaid, a life that cost too much. So as he grows up inside those red and gold walls, Tyrion feels neither love nor acceptance from the one man whose word shapes his world. Any warmth he receives is conditional, bound to performance, to how well he tallies coin, remembers names, or recites the histories of the Westerlands. His value to Tywin is purely instrumental. He continues to be treated as a tool for legacy, never as a son. The body has changed, the mockery of dwarf and monster erased, but the emotional ledger has not. In Tywin's private reckoning, the boy still owes a life he can never repay, and that quiet unspoken debt will guide every decision that follows. And it is when this beautiful, unwanted son first reaches beyond the castle walls, toward a nearby village and a girl named Tysha, that the fracture between father and child finally begins to split open. Cersei's mirror, Jaime's shadow, sibling bonds in a new light, Tysha is still far in the future. Before that village girl and that promised vengeance, there is the first battlefield Tyrion ever walks, the nursery and the long shadow of his golden siblings. In those early days in the castle, Cersei studies the new brother who took their mother's last breath. He has their same golden hair, the same green eyes, the same proud Lannister features that should have been a comfort and instead feel like an insult. There is no twisted limb to recoil from, no obvious mark of the god's displeasure, only a handsome child cradled in a father's arms that should have held her longer, smiled at her more. So her hatred bends. It is less a scream of disgust and more a slow, simmering resentment. In her mind, this boy has stolen everything. Joanna's life, Tywin's rare softness, the easy praise that should have belonged to the firstborn daughter. As he grows up, every time their father's gaze lingers a heartbeat too long on the younger son, every time Tyrion's quick tongue draws the hint of a smirk from that stone face, Cersei feels the theft renewed. Jaime, though, sees something else. He sees a playmate, a shadow, a little lion who can follow him into the yard without collapsing under the weight of a practice sword. There is no careful, pitying gentleness, no constant reminder that his brother must be shielded from every rough game. Jaime hauls Tyrion into the mud, teaches him to fall, to laugh through bruises, to ride the smallest palfrey in the stables until the boy's legs stop shaking. This only grows when Tyrion, flushed and breathless, manages a clean pass with a blunted spear, and Jaime claps him on the back as if he were already a squire. Cersei watches that too. Her cruelty adapts. If she cannot mock a twisted body, she will poison a straight back. In whispered moments, in corridors and candlelit corners, she leans close and tells him he is a cursed golden mask hiding rot, a pretty shell around the same monster that killed their mother. She calls him false heir, false son, a hollow thing that their father dresses up to forget what he truly is. He laughs it off in front of Jaime, but in the quiet after, he feels neither love nor acceptance, only the echo of words that sound too much like Tywin's silence. And yet there are small mercies, brief and treacherous. One afternoon, Cersei braids his hair, fingers surprisingly gentle as she copies the style their mother once wore. For a heartbeat, the twins and their little brother are only children in a sunlit room. Then she pulls too tight, hard enough to make his eyes sting, and mocks him for the tears. Jaime finds him later in the yard and, saying nothing, adjusts Tyrion's stirrups and rides the perimeter of the walls with him until the boy's breathing slows. By the time he reaches his first manhood, the triangle is set. One brother who loves, one sister who loathes, and above them a father whose rare approval hangs like a sword over all three. Tyrion continues to chase that approval, Jaime continues to shield him from the worst of Cersei's barbs, and Cersei continues to sharpen those barbs on the knowledge that, handsome or not, this younger brother might yet stand between her and everything she believes she deserves. It is within this fragile, poisoned balance that Tysha will later appear, and that first stolen taste of love beyond the rock will threaten to tip the entire arrangement into open war. Trying on Jaime's armor, the warrior path that almost fits Tysha will come from beyond the rock, but before that, Tyrion tries one last time to belong within it. The clang of steel in the training yard becomes his morning bell. Dust hangs in the air behind the castle like a golden fog, kicked up by boots and blunted blades, by boys who dream of songs and men who know better. In the midst of them stands a teenage Tyrion, tall enough, agile enough, sweat darkening his tunic as he circles another Lannister man-at-arms with a practice sword in hand. At first, he throws himself into swordplay as he once threw himself into books, striking to become just like his older brother Jaime. His stance is measured, his footwork careful, his cuts clean. He turns a parry into a riposte, slips a thrust past a shield, and the watching guards murmur that Lord Tywin's youngest shows promise. He continues to drill until his arms burn, until his lungs feel scraped raw, until the blisters on his palms break and bleed. But promise is not legend. Jaime moves through the same yard, like water running downhill, never forced, never clumsy, never unsure. Where Tyrion must think, measure distance, recall instruction, anticipate angles, Jaime simply is. The sword becomes an extension of Jaime's will, while in Tyrion's hand it remains, stubbornly, a tool that must be managed, corrected, controlled. Jaime sees this, but he does not mock it. Between bouts he claps a gauntleted hand on Tyrion's shoulder, laughing with him, not at him, pointing out the small things that separate a good fighter from a dead one. Lower the shield a finger's breadth, turn the wrist a heartbeat earlier. Trust the feet, not just the blade. In these moments as he grows up, Tyrion feels a fragile warmth, as if Jaime is trying to pull his brother into his own shining world of knights, banners, and oaths. Then, one afternoon, Tywin watches. The father stands at the edge of the yard in plain wool and rich fur, no armor, no sigil needed. His gaze follows every exchange as Tyrion spars, this time against two men-at-arms in sequence, driving one back with a flurry of blows before being forced to yield to the second. It is not a poor showing. He keeps his feet, keeps his head, lands several telling strikes. The men-at-arms are breathing harder than he is when it ends. Jaime smiles. The captain of the guard nods. Tywin does neither. "Adequate," the Lord of Casterly Rock says at last, as if passing judgment on a ledger entry. "Not good." Not promising, not even acceptable. Adequate. The word falls heavier than a mace, and Tyrion feels neither love nor acceptance in it, only the cold confirmation that he has failed at something he had not yet realized was a test. This only grows when he catches his father's eyes lingering, not on his form, but on Jaime's. On the golden knight who needs no correction, no encouragement, no excuses. In that gaze, Tyrion understands, no matter how many hours he spends in this yard, no matter how many bruises he collects, he will never be the son Tywin wanted first. The gap between what he is and what his father demands begins to fester there, in the dust and sweat. And it is from that slow, poisoned wound that his path will twist away from the sword, toward the one thing that might yet make Tywin fear him. Adequate is an insult. Tywin's contempt as fuel and poison the wound festers, and Tywin gives it fresh salt the first time Tyrion is allowed into a mock melee. It happens on a clear autumn afternoon in the castle yard. The squires of Casterly Rock clash with blunted steel, wooden shields splintering as stable boys cheer from the wall. Tyrion has trained for this, has bled for this, has measured his stance against every drill Sir Cavan could devise. When he steps into the ring, he does not look like a jester in mail. He looks like a young lion, trying, desperately, to roar. The bout is supposed to be friendly. It becomes something else. Tyrion watches, waits, and lets the other boys tire themselves with wild swings. He uses footwork, patience, and a shield edge driven hard into an exposed wrist. One by one, the other squires fall, until only a panting cousin remains, his guard sloppy, his pride louder than his breath. For a heartbeat, there is silence. Then the yard erupts. Some of the household knights clap, a few of the servants dare to shout his name. In that instant, as he grows up in front of their eyes, he feels neither love nor acceptance. But he does feel something close. Acknowledgement. The fragile shadow of praise he has chased since childhood. Tywin has been watching from the balcony above. Golden hair, green eyes, arms folded. The father as judge and executioner both. When Cavan remarks that the boy did well, Tywin's answer falls like a hammer. Children playing at war, he says, his gaze never softening. Jaime will show them what battle truly is when he rides with Lord Crakehall in the spring. The comparison is not casual. It is a weapon. In front of Tyrion, in front of the yard, Tywin lifts Jaime up as the measure of a man. Real steel, real blood, real glory. Tyrion's victory is erased in a breath, reduced to a game in the sand, while the true heir is promised the field. This only grows when Tywin speaks of Jaime's natural grace with a sword, his instinct for command, as if the younger son's efforts are an elaborate jest. Tyrion hears every word. He continues to train, driving himself harder, longer, until his hands blister and his shoulders burn. His body is capable. That is the bitter irony of this timeline. The barrier is not his height or his strength, but a standard set just out of reach, and almost good enough that his father uses as a form of discipline. Adequate is an insult. Adequate means he has failed. So another pattern begins. After drills, after bruises, he finds the wine jugs earlier each evening. The first cup dulls the echo of Tywin's voice. The second blurs Jaime's shining image in his mind. The third lets him pretend for a little while that effort alone might someday be enough to win acceptance. And yet, on certain days, as the sun slants low over the yard, Tyrion's gaze drifts upward. Past the clashing boys, past the stone gallery where his father stands, to the high windows of the castle library. Behind that glass lie ledgers, histories, treatises on war and trade, a different battlefield where steel matters less than thought. He wonders, quietly, if there is a place in those silent rooms where his father's shadow is shorter, and where a different kind of strength might yet be forged. The library as refuge. When the sword fails, the mind awakens. So one afternoon, while the clash of practice steel still echoes faintly from the yard, Tyrion pushes open the heavy oak door of the Casterly Rock library. The air is cooler here, still and heavy, and in the slanting light from the high windows, dust motes drift like slow, silent sparks above rows of leather bindings. The room smells of ink and old glue, of parchment and polished wood. It feels to him like a hall where another kind of power is kept, quieter than the yard, but no less real. Shelves climb the stone walls like ramparts, not of rock but of words. And as he grows up, he will remember this first moment as clearly as his first bruised knuckles on the training grounds.
Here the silence does not judge his stance or his reach.
Here he feels neither love nor acceptance, but something colder and more promising. At first he wanders without plan, fingertips tracing cracked spines, reading titles half aloud.
The Conquest of Aegon Targaryen.
Ledgers of Lannisport tariffs. A Bravosi treatise on interest and debt. Then curiosity catches fire. He begins with the shining tales of Aegon's conquest and the Field of Fire, drawn by dragons and burning kings. But he continues to the duller-looking volumes that most squires ignore. He reads about trade routes from Old Town to Pentos, about grain prices in lean years, about how a wise lord taxes his people without bleeding his own village dry. Philosophies from the free cities follow, dense pages arguing about justice, power, and the nature of duty. Tyrion finds, to his surprise, that the words move in his head like pieces on a Sivas board. Then come the military texts, accounts of the Blackfire rebellions, hard-eyed manuals on supply lines, sieges, and the uglier truths behind glorious charges. The more he takes in, the more the world beyond the castle walls seems to unfold in his mind. His tongue, always quick, finds a new edge here. During lessons, he starts correcting maesters on dates, on the yield of certain mines, on the number of ships Lannisport can harbour in winter storms. He debates tutors on whether fear or love binds men tighter to a banner, and this only grows when he realises he can win these contests without lifting a blade. In small councils, he challenges a steward's figures, asking quiet, precise questions until the man's sums collapse under their own weight. Slowly, his enthusiasm for pure knightly glory fades. The sword becomes one tool among many, an instrument to enforce decisions rather than define them. He still trains, still rides, still wears mail when required, but in his own mind, he is no longer chasing Jaime's shadow. He is chasing understanding, of coin, of grain, of men. And then comes the moment. In a side chamber, a steward outlines a plan to cut rations to a struggling mining village, hoping to please Tywin with short-term savings. Tyrion dismantles it, calmly, step by step, the risk of unrest, the loss of future labour, the insult to Lannister protection. Tywin, passing unseen beyond the open door, pauses. Just a heartbeat, just long enough for Tyrion to hope that his father has heard, and that, perhaps, a different kind of air is beginning to be noticed. A lion of ledgers, Tyrion surpasses Jaime where Tywin actually needs him in the days that follow. Casterly Rock itself becomes Tyrion's proving ground. The gold mine tunnels run deep, the ledgers run deeper, and it is in ink and numbers that this different kind of air begins to carve out a place his father cannot ignore. At first, Tywin's stewards resent the intrusion. The boy who should be in the yard with Jaime instead sits in the counting room, sleeves rolled, eyes moving line by line. He continues to trace columns of figures until patterns emerge. A caravan from Lannisport that never arrived. A merchant who pays less each season. A discrepancy between what is pulled from the earth and what is recorded in the castle books. In one cool afternoon, he quietly uncovers a missing river of coin, siphoned through false weights and friendly scribes. Tyrion does not boast, he simply lays the corrected accounts before his father. Short declarative, then the longer explanation. The falsified tallies, the bribed factors, the guard captain who never noticed wagons leaving half full. Tywin listens in silence, the only sound the faint scratch of his ring against the table, and when he finally speaks it is to issue orders, not praise. Yet as he grows up, Tyrion understands that the very fact those orders follow his words is its own small victory. This only grows when the harvests begin to falter. Looking over grain levies from a distant village, Tyrion sees what the Maester has missed. A 3-year pattern of decline. Storms along the coast. Fields left fallow because too many men were taken for distant wars. He proposes rerouting surplus from inland lordships, offering reduced tariffs on Lannisport trade in exchange for guaranteed shipments, and staggering collections so small folk do not starve before winter's end. Where Jaime would have shrugged at such matters, eager to return to steel and sweat, Tyrion lingers, fascinated by how a signature on a page can save more lives than a sword in a melee. And it is during one tense autumn court that his growing skill is tested. 2 vassal houses stand before Tywin, arguing over a contested stream that has shifted its course, taking fertile banks with it. Each claims ancient right, each threatens to withhold levies. Tywin's temper is close to breaking, his reputation and his purse balanced on the edge of an ill-judged decree. Before that decree falls, Tyrion speaks. He suggests a rotational grazing schedule, joint maintenance of new irrigation dikes, and a shared toll on merchants using the road that crosses both their lands, the proceeds divided by an agreed measure of men and grain. In a single elegant compromise, he saves Tywin coin, face, and the need to choose one proud banner over another. The hall is silent. Then Tywin inclines his head the smallest fraction. "You did well," he says, the words clipped, almost reluctant. But to Tyrion they burn brighter than any torch in the castle. For a heartbeat he feels neither love nor acceptance, only the sharp, conditional warmth of being useful. It is a lesson that brands itself into him. Competence brings responsibilities. Responsibilities bring brief flashes of approval, and so he continues to chase those flashes like a man in the dark chasing glimpses of distant fire. What happens when that fire is taken away will decide far more than the accounts of Casterly Rock, the heir in all but name. When Jaime takes the white cloak, what happens when the one son Tywin has trained to chase fire suddenly has that fire placed just beyond his reach? It happens in a single, shattering afternoon. The throne room of the Red Keep is hot, crowded, heavy with incense and expectation. Jaime Lannister kneels before the Mad King, all gold and easy grace, while white cloaks hang like ghosts along the walls. When Aerys names him to the Kingsguard, the hall erupts in murmurs. Cersei's smile freezes, then curdles. Tywin's face does not move at all, but something in his eyes goes hard and distant, like stone cooling after the forge. Cersei's fury is immediate, almost feral. This was meant to be her triumph, her twin beside her as consort and shield, a golden pair ruling from within the same castle. Instead, she watches her brother pledge life, sword, and seed to another man. Later, behind closed doors, she rages at Jaime, at Aerys, at the injustice of vows that steal futures. Jaime, for all his bravado, hears the edge beneath her words. A future stolen not only from her, but from Casterly Rock itself. For Tywin, the blow is colder. The law is clear, older than any Targaryen decree. A Kingsguard knight cannot hold lands, cannot wed, cannot father legitimate heirs. By Westerosi custom, by every charter and precedent, Jaime's white cloak cuts him cleanly from the line of succession. The rock must pass to another. The rock, by right, must pass to Tyrion. Tyrion hears it first in whispers, a steward bowing a little lower, a hedge knight at court calling him my lord heir with an awkward half-smile, a raven from a minor village lord addressed not to Lord Tywin and his sons, but to Lord Tywin and his heir, Tyrion Lannister. As he grows up, he had dreamed of this in childish shapes, his father's hand on his shoulder, praise given freely, the castle and its responsibilities laid before him like an anointing. Now that the path is suddenly open, excitement and dread knot together in his gut. He knows the ledgers, the mines, the restless small folk who live in the shadow of the Golden Lion. He has walked the halls, heard the rock's slow breathing in the dark. The boy who craved acceptance sees for a moment a future where competence is no longer a leash but a crown. Tywin refuses to name it. At council he speaks of the rock's future in distant, bloodless terms, as if discussing some other lord's inheritance. When a bannerman addresses Tyrion as heir in his presence, Tywin's gaze cuts across the room like a drawn blade, and the word is never repeated. He continues to assign tasks, to trust Tyrion with coin and courts, but he feels neither love nor acceptance, only the message buried in the silence: rule, but do not presume. In King's Landing, in Lannisport, in every village that sends tithes to the castle, people speak as though Tyrion's lordship is inevitable. Only Tywin behaves as if the line of succession simply ends with him, a cliff where a road should be. That impossible dissonance between what the realm assumes and what his father will admit becomes the quiet fault line under House Lannister, waiting for the first true shock to make it break. Denial as strategy. Tywin's war against his own bloodline. That impossible dissonance hardens into Tywin's private doctrine. In public, he allows the courtesies to stand. Tyrion is addressed as heir given precedence at feasts, entrusted with ledgers and tallies. In private, the father's mind writes a different history, one in which succession pauses politely at his own grave and refuses to step past the memory of Joanna's death. He tells himself he is merely waiting for the boy to ripen, to prove beyond doubt that he deserves the rock. It sounds reasonable when he mutters it to Kavan over maps, or when he stares at the sea from the highest balcony of the castle. Yet as he grows up, no victory is ever quite enough, no balance sheet quite flawless, no pacified village quite grateful enough to wash away the image of Joanna's still face on bloody linen. The test keeps moving, always one more campaign, one more decade. This denial does not stay locked in his skull. It leaks into policy like a slow poison. Tywin begins to cultivate distant Lannister cousins with an attentiveness that should have gone to his son. He grants small commands to Martin and Lancel, arranges marriages for cadet branches that bind them closer to Casterly Rock, and speaks with unusual warmth of the Casterlys by marriage in Case and Castamir's surviving lines. Each quiet favour is a thread, tugging the wider lion's web tighter around the seat Tyrion is supposed to inherit. At the same time, he continues to pour gold and attention into Cersei's children. Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen, they become in his calculations more than royal hostages or political pawns. They are escape hatches. In council, he muses aloud about the value of a grandson ruling from the Red Keep, while a trusted regent governs the West. And the way he says trusted never quite includes the man sitting at his right hand. The humiliation remains mostly quiet, but it is constant. At feasts, minor lords raise cups to Tyrion's future rule, asking careful questions about roads, tariffs, or the next expansion of the port. Before he can answer, Tywin's voice cuts in, calm, implacable, describing plans as if his son were a clerk holding the parchment, not the heir who will one day sign it. The room laughs politely, the moment passes, and only Tyrion notices how often his father speaks of the next Lord of Casterly Rock, without ever naming him. In these moments he feels neither love nor acceptance, only the chill of being necessary and unwanted at once. He is paraded as heir when it suits the family's grandeur, then treated in private as an expendable steward, a clever caretaker holding the keys until a more suitable lion is found. This only grows when rumours reach him that Tywin has inquired, very discreetly, about legal precedents for passing a great seat to a grandson over a living son. All of this carves itself into Tyrion's self-image. He learns to think of power as something always provisional, always at risk of being snatched away by bloodlines and whispered clauses. Every praise feels like a prelude to revocation. Every new set of responsibilities tastes like another test he has already failed. And when the realm finally tips into war, when kings rise and fall and dragons stir across the sea, that unresolved question over Casterly Rock does not stay in the West. It follows him into every bargain he strikes, every betrayal he contemplates, every banner he decides to raise or let burn. The first time he is offered a chance to claim a different kind of throne, far from his father's shadow, all this buried fury will surface at once, and the choice he makes will not be the one Tywin ever prepared for. Duties as insults. The responsibilities meant to keep him small. That unresolved question over Casterly Rock bleeds into something quieter and in some ways crueler. Tywin does not simply deny his son a clear claim. He buries him under duties that are meant to feel like shackles rather than steps toward rule. Tyrion is sent from the great halls down into the dust. 1 month he oversees repairs in a storm-battered village on the coast, counting roof beams and measuring stone, listening to fishermen complain about tariffs and broken nets. Another month he rides inland to handle disputes among small folk, sitting in a cramped sept while farmers argue over a boundary stone, a stray goat, a stolen cart. Between these journeys he is ordered to inspect roads and bridges, to walk the length of a crumbling causeway with a steward, to tally grain in distant granaries where the air is thick with chaff and the only gold in sight is the colour of old straw. His father calls them chores, not training, not the responsibilities of an heir, but busy work. Tywin speaks of them as if a wayward boy must be kept occupied, as if an idle Tyrion would drink, gamble, or shame the family name. There is no talk of instruction, no patient explanation of how taxes flow from village to castle, from castle to Casterly Rock. There is only the command, the thinly veiled dismissal, and the unspoken message that a true son would be at court or in the vanguard, not ankle-deep in mud. As he grows up, he feels neither love nor acceptance in those orders, only the cool precision of a man moving a piece on a board. Yet the board is larger than Tywin admits. Those menial circuits through the Westerlands become the veins and arteries of Lannister power. Each repaired road lets levies march faster, each well-kept granary feeds them longer. Each settled quarrel keeps a village from drifting toward rebellion. The prosperity that lets Tywin buy half the realm's loyalty is quietly reinforced every time Tyrion signs off on a new millstone or reallocates grain before a lean winter. He continues to resent the mockery. He knows that when his father praises a campaign or a treaty at court, there will be no mention of the son who made sure the wagons rolled and the villages did not burn. But this only grows when he realizes that, in these forgotten corners, he commands something Tywin cannot counterfeit: genuine loyalty. A miller whose taxes were eased, a hedge knight whose land dispute was fairly judged, a minor house whose harvest was saved by a timely loan. All remember the Lannister who listened. There is a pattern interrupt even Tywin does not see. The very tasks meant to keep Tyrion small are the ones that teach him how power actually moves, through grain counts, road widths, and the tempers of men who will never see a royal court. His pride takes root there, stubborn and secret. By the time he is old enough to be sent away, he has already become the thing his father never intended: a capable administrator, a man who could one day sit a hand's chair and make a kingdom function while others chase glory. When a different dragon queen later looks for someone who can turn conquest into rule, it is these forgotten journeys through mud and granaries that will whisper his name first. Among the small folk, the lion who actually listens. What if the golden son Tywin tried to hide in ledgers and grain stores, began to find his true strength among muddy lanes and forgotten faces instead of marble halls and banners? It starts with a ride to a half-forgotten village clinging to the shadow of Casterly Rock. The road is rutted, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and dung, and the houses lean together as if bracing against the wind and the weight of neglect. Tyrion comes with a small escort, a Lannister banner, and responsibilities his father thinks beneath an heir. Yet he dismounts the moment he reaches the square, boots sinking into the same muck as the small folk. The villagers stare at the lion on his cloak, not at the man himself. There is no twisted body to gawk at, no easy cruelty to whisper about, only another high-born face they expect to pass through like rain. So when Tyrion steps forward, when he stands at eye level with a cobbler whose hands are cracked and bleeding, it confuses them. He asks names, asks who collects their taxes, asks which men prowl the woods and steal their daughters and grain. He continues to press, not with threats, but with questions that show he has actually listened. Their grievances spill out, levies raised twice in a year, a local knight who takes more than is due, bandits fattened on fear while the castle looks away. Other lords might offer a speech about duty and patience. Tyrion instead sends for the records, has the reeve brought forward, and in front of everyone recalculates what is owed. A portion of arrears is forgiven, the next season's tax reduced, a small garrison promised in exchange for clear reports on bandit trails. It is not mercy alone. It is a bargain, practical and immediate. As he grows up and repeats these journeys, moving from one weary village to another, something shifts inside him. The realm stops being a map of banners and sigils pinned in a solar. It becomes a web of faces, of mothers hiding coins in hearthstones, of boys missing fingers from unsafe mines, of old men who fought for kings now begging for salt. Each decision he makes at the castle echoes back to these places, and this only grows when he starts to recognize the patterns of who is always asked to bleed first. He feels neither love nor acceptance from his father for this work. Tywin offers no praise, only curt nods and new lists, as if justice were merely another column of numbers to be balanced. Yet among the small folk, Tyrion hears something different. A miller mutters that this lord actually listens. A widow sends him a wheel of hard cheese the next year, wrapped in cloth like an offering. And one day, as he turns to mount his horse, an old woman says it plain, almost to herself, "You're not like other lords." Due to the forest, the words lodge deeper than any rare compliment from the castle ever could. They do not speak of birth or glory, only of a fragile trust that he has earned. Later, when he looks with unexpected warmth on bastards, on cripples, on broken things of every kind, it will not come from a twisted spine but from these roads, these faces, these quiet verdicts. And when a dragon's shadow finally stretches across this same land, it is this memory that will make him ask a dangerous question. What happens to all these lives when conquest comes again? The bandits, the girl, and the first taste of being a hero, those faces stay with him. They ride beside him days later as Tyrion takes a small escort out from the castle, answering another complaint from another village that his father would never bother to see. The day is grey and low when they crest the last hill. The village ahead is wrong. Smoke rises in ugly, twisting plumes, not from cooking fires, but from that particular chaos that comes when men break things they do not own. Shouts carry on the wind. A woman's scream cuts through the clatter like a blade. Tyrion does not have time to think of Tywin, of responsibilities, of how an heir should behave. He kicks his horse forward. The gold lion on his cloak snaps in the wind as his escort curses and spurs after him, steel rasping free. They ride straight into an ambush. Bandits spill from behind low stone walls and half-burnt sheds, bows already bent, rusted helms gleaming dully. The first arrow takes a Lannister man in the throat, spraying red across Tyrion's reins. The second hisses past his ear. The world narrows to the weight of his sword, to the thud of hooves, to the raw taste of fear in his mouth. He has trained in the yard, yes, but practice is not this. His first swing is too wide, more panic than form, yet it still hacks into a man's shoulder, bone grinding under steel. The bandit howls and falls. Tyrion's arm jolts, his grip almost slips, and something in him wants to freeze, to flinch away from the reality of warm blood on his hand. He does not. He continues to strike. He fights competently, but not cleanly. A mace glances off his mailed hip, pain blooming hot and sharp. A knife kisses his forearm, opening a line of red beneath the lion worked into his sleeve. He is terrified, but he does not break. Step, parry, stab, a boot in a man's knee. a desperate shove that sends another into a horse's hooves. Around him, his escort regroups, and together they begin to turn the tide. When it is over, the village is a ruin of trampled earth and scattered bodies, but the screaming has stopped. Survivors emerge from doorways and cellars, eyes wide, faces streaked with ash. Gratitude comes in rough voices and awkward bows, not the practiced praise of courtiers. And as he grows up, this memory will stand apart. The day common folk looked at him without fear of his father. Among them is a girl on her knees in the mud, dress torn, hair matted with straw and soot. A dead bandit lies at her feet, his skull caved in by a broken length of timber she still clutches in white-knuckled hands. She is shaking, but her eyes are clear, sharp, fixed on the young lord who has just cut down the man dragging her toward the trees. "Tyrion Lannister," he says, breath still ragged, sword hanging bloody at his side. She looks him up and down, taking in the fine cloak, the dented mail, the trembling in his fingers that he cannot quite master. "I gathered," she answers, voice hoarse but steady, "the lion on the cloak, the way the bandits ran, and the way you nearly fell off your horse with that last swing." A ghost of a smile touches her mouth. "Thank you for that, all the same. There is no fawning, no elaborate title." She speaks to him as if he is simply a man who arrived at the right moment, not a distant lord from a shining castle. He feels neither love nor acceptance in the way his father would define them. Yet something in her plain words lands deeper than any measured compliment from Casterly Rock's hall. "What is your name?" he asks. "Tasha," she replies. "My father had responsibilities here once, before men like that decided the world was theirs to take." She nods toward the corpses with a hard, quiet fury that surprises him. He finds himself wanting to say more, to ask more, to stand a little straighter despite the ache in his side. In her gaze, he is not Tywin's disappointment, not the clever son shunted to the margins, but the man who came with steel when it mattered. For the first time, he feels like the hero of his own story, however clumsy his swordplay, however fresh his scars. And this only grows when the villagers press them to stay the night, when Tasha insists on binding his wounds herself, and when, under a low-beamed roof that smells of smoke and herbs, she asks the one question that will begin to pull him away from his father's shadow. If he could choose his own life, what would he be, if not Tywin Lannister's son? A secret wedding. Tasha as Tyrion's first act of defiance. For a moment, Tyrion almost laughs at the question. To imagine a life beyond his father's shadow feels like imagining a sky without the sun. Yet in that low-roofed house, with Tasha's hands still smelling faintly of herbs and smoke, the thought refuses to leave him. They talk long after the rest of the village has gone to sleep. At first, it is easy talk, the kind that comes with shared wine and the fading memory of danger. He tells stories of the castle, of lords who shout about boundary stones and sheep, of a father who can turn a whole hall to silence with one lifted brow. Then the words deepen. He speaks of fear and freedom, of how, as he grows up, every step feels measured against Tywin's expectations. How he feels neither love nor acceptance unless he is useful. She listens, without flinching. She does not look away. Tasha refuses to be overawed by lions or gold. Where others see a Lannister heir to be courted or a dangerous name to be avoided, she sees a clever, wounded young man trying, in his own crooked way, to do right. She laughs at his sharpest jests, but she also calls them a shield. She praises his courage in facing bandits, yet quietly asks why his voice trembles only when he speaks of his father. Her questions cut more cleanly than any blade, and this only grows when she admits that to her he is not a prize, not a monster, not a burden to be pitied, but simply Tyrion. In that recognition, something long starved in him stirs. For once, he does not have to earn affection through performance or brilliance. He does not have to win the room with wine and words before anyone will sit beside him. Her acceptance is quiet, unadorned, almost ordinary, and because of that, it feels miraculous. The boy who carries responsibilities as a shield, who calculates every word in the castle halls, finds himself speaking without calculation at all. So when the idea of marriage comes, half a jest at first, thrown between kisses and whispered confessions, it does not feel absurd. It feels inevitable. A wandering septon called from a nearby campfire. A simple ring, hammered from a bit of silver he had meant to spend on a finer cloak. Vows spoken with trembling sincerity, not as a political bargain, but as a plea to keep this fragile, impossible happiness alive. There are no banners, no feast, no father's blessing. Only the crackle of the hearth, the septon's worn voice, Tasha's fingers tightening around his as if anchoring him to a different future. In that moment, he continues to believe that he has done something Tywin cannot touch, carved out a small, hidden kingdom of his own choosing. As dawn seeps through the shutters, and Tasha sleeps against his shoulder, Tyrion lets himself imagine a life built from this night outward, not downward from his father's will. He does not yet know how violently that dream will be broken. For now he holds it with almost childlike hope, certain that, at last, he has found a love that even Casterly Rock cannot crush. Tywin finds out. Love meets the cold logic of class dawn, does not just seep through the shutters, it slips under doors and through keyholes, carrying whispers with it. While Tyrion dreams of a life beyond the castle itself is already turning against him. The secret unravels in the way all secrets in great houses do, not through grand betrayals, but through small, frightened men trying to please a greater one. A guard, drunk on cheap wine in a Lannisport tavern, boasts of the young lord who bought a septon's silence. A steward, long trained to hear danger in every careless word, passes the tale along. And it is Cersei's quiet, watchful maid who finally brings the rumour, neat and poisonous, to Tywin's solar. Tywin does not shout. He does not throw the cup in his hand or strike the messenger. Instead, he sits very still, the light from the narrow window drawing hard lines across his face, and begins to ask questions. Names, dates, the septon, the village, the girl. Each answer is another stone on a scale that has already tipped in his mind. His youngest son, his would-be heir, has married a commoner in secret. To others, it might be a love story. To Tywin, it is an act of war against the order he has built. He thinks of alliances squandered, of betrothals lost, of the stain on Lannister blood. He thinks of Jaime bound to the Kingsguard, of Cersei already traded to a king, of how this only grows when the last unwed lion dares to give his name away in a roadside sept. As he grows up, Tyrion has always tested the edges of his father's patience. Now, in Tywin's eyes, he has crossed a border into treason. The confrontation comes that evening. Tyrion is summoned to the solar, still carrying the warmth of Tasha's touch, like armor he does not yet know is paper thin. Tywin waits behind his desk, hands folded, the line of Casterly Rock framed by stone and shadow. "Is it true?" Tywin asks. No title, no fatherly softness, only the cold weight of judgment. When Tyrion admits it, when he speaks Tasha's name, Tywin's lip curls as if at something foul. He calls her a peasant girl, a grasping village wench who saw a lion and clawed her way upward. He speaks of stolen honor, of a gold cloak taken off guard, of a family nearly shamed before half the realm. Tyrion tries to answer in kind, with reason and careful words, but what spills out instead is raw. He speaks of love, of how he feels neither love nor acceptance in these halls, of how this girl saw the man and not the lion. He asks, almost pleading, whether his happiness should matter, whether a father's praise must always be bought with blood and obedience. For a moment, Tywin only studies him, as if examining a flawed piece of armor. Then he gives his verdict. Love is a child's word. Responsibilities, alliances, and blood are what endure. He will not have his son's folly drag House Lannister down to the mud. The marriage will be ended, the lesson will be taught, and all involved will remember what it means to touch a lion. Tyrion opens his mouth to protest, but Tywin has already begun giving quiet, precise orders. Orders that will turn a secret wedding night into a spectacle of ruin, and that will show Tyrion what his father's lessons truly cost. The cruel lesson. Tasha, the garrison, and a soul shattered. The orders move through the castle like a cold wind. Servants scatter, guards straighten, and the garrison is summoned with the quiet efficiency that has made Tywin's name a byword for order and fear. Tyrion watches it happen, understanding nothing and too much at once. They are brought to the barracks hall, not the Great Hall. Stone walls close, low ceiling, the smell of sweat and steel, a place for soldiers, not for vows. Tasha stands beside him, fingers still twined with his, her small hand trembling against his own. At first he thinks this is some cruel lecture, some staged annulment. It is worse. Tywin has a chair set at the far end, as if presiding over a court. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. He announces with that measured, didactic tone that the girl was never what she claimed. Tasha, he says, was paid. A common whore bought in a nearby village, hired to play the part of grateful maiden so that his foolish son might learn how cheaply love is purchased. The word hangs there, paid. And Tyrion feels something in his chest lurch. As he grows up, he has heard his father's contempt for small folk, for camp followers, for anyone beneath the lion's regard, now that contempt is turned into a blade. Tywin explains the lesson carefully, almost patiently. Lannisters do not marry commoners. Lannisters are not ruled by feeling. A future heir does not throw away responsibilities for a pair of soft eyes and a sob story. Then Tywin gives the order that turns cruelty into horror. The garrison is to have her, all of them, one by one. Payment for services rendered, and payment again and again, until the lie of love is ground out beneath mailed fists and rough hands. Tyrion lunges forward, but guards seize his arms, gauntlets biting into flesh. His protests are smothered against a steel-clad shoulder. He can only watch. This only grows when the first man steps forward, fumbling with his belt under the cold regard of his lord. Tywin does not look away. He continues to speak over the sounds, explaining to his son that this is what comes of forgetting his station, that a lion who mates with rats breeds only weakness. Each phrase is a verdict. Each scream is punctuation. Through it all, Tasha's eyes are the last anchor. At first, there is that same desperate love, the same trust that he will find a way, that the clever boy who saved her once will save her again. Then terror, wide and animal as the line of men seems endless. Then, slowly, numbness, as if something behind those eyes has been shuttered forever. There is a moment, small, shattering, when her gaze finds his, and he sees it. The understanding that he cannot help her, that he cannot even help himself against his father. Whatever he feels, whatever promises he made in that half-ruined set, mean nothing before Tywin's will. When it is finally over, the hall is quiet, the men dismissed like they have finished a drill. Tywin leaves one last lesson behind. Love is a weakness, a lie, a weapon to be used against fools. Tyrion stands in the wreckage of what they had, and as he grows up in the shadow of that night, he feels neither love nor acceptance in any touch that follows. In their place grows something harder. Self-loathing, a cold, bright hatred for Tywin, and a new conviction that in this family, even love wears Lannister red because it is meant to draw blood. From romantic to cynic, how one night rewrites a man that night does not end when the door closes and the gold is paid. It lingers, a stain on memory, replaying itself in fragments that refuse to fade. In the quiet hours afterward, Tyrion's mind becomes its own cruel storyteller. First, it conjures Tasha as she looked in the village lane, mud on her dress, terror in her eyes, then that soft, incredulous smile when he offered his hand. Then it shifts to the firelit inn, to her laughing at his jests, to the way she watched him as if he were the only man in the castle or the world. As he grows up, those bright scenes return again and again, a promise of what love might have been. And this only grows when, unbidden, the reel jerks forward to the end. He remembers her on the floor. He remembers his father's voice, flat and cold, turning her into a lesson. He remembers the line of Lannister men, the degradation passed from knight to groom to stable boy, until the girl who once clutched his hand now stares past him with empty eyes. The contrast is unbearable. That first loving gaze, full of trust and gratitude, slammed against the final one, glassy and broken. He cannot stop replaying both, cannot decide which hurts more. Grief comes first, raw and choking, for the wife stolen and the future burned. Then grief curdles into anger, a slow, simmering rage at Tywin, at Jaime, at every man who laughed. Shame follows close behind. Shame for being fooled. Shame for doing nothing. Shame that turns inward, whispering that he was the true jest, that he was the one bought and sold. In that whisper grows a deeper conviction that he is fundamentally unworthy of genuine affection, that any love offered to him must be a mask, a trap, a performance. From that conviction, his worldview hardens. Relationships become transactions. Affection is a coin to be weighed, not a gift to be trusted. Loyalty looks fragile now, something that can be ordered to heal with a few sharp words from a father, something that breaks the instant it is inconvenient. Vulnerability, which once felt intoxicating in that brief secret marriage, now reveals itself as a fatal flaw, the chink where the knife always slides in. As he grows up in this new understanding, he feels neither love nor acceptance in any promise that does not come with terms attached, so he continues to seek comfort where the rules are clear. Sex workers become his refuge, not because he believes their affection, but because no belief is required. The price is named, the service rendered, the debt paid. His humor sharpens into armor, a defensive edge that keeps others laughing just far enough away. When something real threatens to form, an earnest gaze, a lingering touch, he sabotages it first, ending the thing before it can end him. And in the midst of this ruin, a quieter resolve takes shape. If he cannot be loved as a son, then he will make himself indispensable in another way. He will be feared and needed as a mind, the heir not of his father's affection, but of his father's power. If hearts cannot be trusted, ledgers and battle plans can, and Tyrion begins to turn toward them with a cold, deliberate focus that will reshape both his life and the fate of his house. The mask of wit, Tyrion's armor without a crutch of pity. From that decision, another mask begins to form, not a helm of steel or a lion's helm of gold, but the careful, gleaming mask of wit that Tyrion will polish for the rest of his life. In the canon tale, his sharp tongue grows as armor against jeers, a survival mechanism for a dwarf mocked in every hall he enters. Here, as he grows up in a tall, straight body that draws no stares, that same wit is not forced upon him by cruelty of flesh. It becomes a chosen weapon, not a shield. Something he forges deliberately because he understands that words can wound more precisely than any blade his father's knights could teach him to wield. At feasts in the great hall of the castle, he tests this weapon. The scene is always the same, torches guttering against stone, minstrels playing in the corner, lords grown loud on wine and self-importance. Tyrion sits a little below Tywin's high seat, the handsome lesser heir who feels neither love nor acceptance, and he listens. He notes every boast, every contradiction, every whispered scandal. Then, with a single well-placed jest, he skewers a lord's hypocrisy, turns a veiled insult aside, or redirects a probing question about his responsibilities into laughter at someone else's expense. This only grows when he begins to attend councils in earnest. In the solar, with ledgers and maps spread before them, he continues to prod at the edges of what he can get away with. A sly remark about a bannerman's unpaid debts. A quiet observation that slices through a maester's pompous speech. A seemingly careless joke that forces a hedge knight to reveal more than he intends. Each time he watches his father's jaw tighten, sees Cersei's eyes narrow, feels the room shift around him. Without being visibly lesser, his barbs land differently. No lord can dismiss him as a misshapen joke or a living insult from the gods. They see instead a sharp, well-dressed, undeniably Lannister man whose mind is as keen as his features. When he mocks, the laughter that follows is edged with fear, because the one doing the mocking looks like an heir, speaks like an heir, and might one day rule them from Casterly Rock's heights. There is a cost. In the books, much of his humor bends back upon himself, a self-deprecation that softens the blow. Here, the cruelty has nowhere to turn but outward. His jests become harder, more surgical, sometimes needlessly vicious, reflecting not a man hiding from scorn of his body, but a son bleeding from the absence of love and praise. He feels neither love nor acceptance, so he learns to inflict the discomfort he knows so well, to make others flinch so that he does not have to. By the time his reputation spreads beyond the village and the western castles, Tyrion is known less for any sword stroke than for the way a single sentence from his lips can end an argument, a career, or a marriage pact. His mind becomes his primary identity not because his body failed him, but because love did, and he has chosen the weapon that best avenges that wound. The question is not whether this mask will protect him, but what happens the first time someone dares to strike back and shatter it. Rewriting King's Landing, a different imp arrives at court the first time. Tyrion Lannister rides through the gates of King's Landing in this world. The city does not laugh. There are still whispers, of course, but they are not about a misshapen imp. They are about a tall young lion with his siblings' same golden hair, the same green eyes, and the same cool, assessing gaze that seems to weigh the worth of every man who bows as he passes.
The small folk see only another high-born lordling, crimson and gold against the pale stone.
The courtiers see something far more dangerous, a possible heir, a rival, a prize. In the Red Keep's shadowed halls, the change is immediate. Where in canon he shuffles in as a mocked curiosity, here he moves with the easy confidence of a man who has worn a sword at his hip since boyhood and learned to make that sword matter less than the tongue that commands it. Ladies of half a dozen houses glance twice instead of once. Their mothers count years and dowries in their heads. This only grows when the first quiet rumours spread that Tywin's youngest son has a talent for numbers, for ships, for the dull, grinding work of governance that so many high lords neglect. As he grows up, he has walked through villages and castles as the visible face of Lannister justice, and the king's courtiers have heard the tales. A land dispute settled without blood between houses Spicer and Brax. A granary saved from corruption by a sudden meticulous audit. A band of hedge knights turned into a disciplined escort rather than a drunken liability. He continues to build that reputation with every measured word at court, every small suggestion that makes a royal decree function instead of fail. Tywin's decision to send him to the capital is no simple exile. The father who once used lesser responsibilities as a mockery now understands that this son is too useful to waste entirely in the West, yet still too dangerous to leave at Casterly Rock as an unquestioned heir. So Tyrion is dispatched as envoy, troubleshooter, and if need be, scapegoat. It is punishment and promotion intertwined, affection withheld but praise implied in the weight of the tasks he is given. The court feels that difference. In the original tale, the imp can be dismissed, his counsel stolen, his person humiliated without fear of consequence. Here, every lord who smiles at him does so with calculation, measuring the day when this man might sit as Lord of Casterly Rock, with 10,000 Westerland spears at his back. He is not the jester at the feast. He is the guest whose favor might decide which house thrives and which house starves. And yet he feels neither love nor acceptance in those glances, only hunger. Marriage offers arrive not as gifts but as chains. Allies approach with flattery, not friendship. The underestimation that shielded him in canon is replaced by scrutiny, by expectation, by the constant awareness that every word he speaks will be weighed as policy, not jest. So the question becomes simple and terrible at once. If the most underestimated man in Westeros is never underestimated, if every eye is on him from the moment he enters the Red Keep, does he grow into a sharper weapon for House Lannister? No monster, just a lion. Cersei and Joffrey's shifting hatred. If Tyrion is never underestimated, Cersei's hatred has to find a different face. In the Red Keep, the change is quiet but profound. There is no misshapen brother to parade as proof that the gods hate House Lannister, no convenient monster to blame when the court whispers about Mad King Aerys, Robert's temper, or Joffrey's cruelties. Cersei cannot point to Tyrion's body, so she points to something far more dangerous, his competence. As he grows up, every shrewd suggestion at council, every deft handling of a petition, becomes an affront, a reminder that her younger brother might be a better ruler than her golden-haired son. Her psychology twists along different lines. In canon, she tells herself that Tyrion's very existence is an insult, a punishment for Joanna's death. Here, that story frays. The boy has the same height, the same poise, the same lion's mane as Jaime. He feels neither love nor acceptance from his father, yet still wins Tywin's praise for his judgments and his ledgers, for the way he shoulders responsibilities in both village and castle without complaint. This only grows when Tywin begins to rely on him openly as acting hand in the capital, letting him negotiate with the Tyrells, discipline the City Watch, and prepare the defenses. Cersei watches that reliance harden. Every nod from their father is a knife. Without dwarfism to fixate on, her fear clarifies. Tyrion is not ashamed to be hidden, but an heir apparent in all but name. The proper son Tywin never had in Jaime. In her mind, he becomes the direct threat to Tommen and Joffrey's inheritance, the rival for Tywin's legacy, the man who might one day sit where her children should. Joffrey feels this, even if he cannot name it. He cannot mock Tyrion's stature now, cannot shove him in front of the court as a freak. Instead, he is forced to endure an uncle who commands respect in the throne room, who walks with a knight's bearing and a steward's mind. When Tyrion slaps him on the bridge of the Blackwater, the scene carries a different weight. This is not a despised imp striking a king, but a tall, broad-shouldered Lannister prince disciplining a wayward boy. The humiliation burns deeper. The resentment does too, and it is during one of these councils, when Tyrion calmly contradicts Joffrey over starving the city, that the pattern truly breaks. The room does not laugh, the room listens. Lords murmur not about the imp, but about a second coming of Tywin, younger, sharper, and far more present. The nickname spreads in the shadows, not in jests but in worried calculations. Tyrion continues to guide, to correct, to restrain. Each success makes Joffrey's defiance more open, more vicious, because every command obeyed from this uncle feels like a stolen piece of kingship. By the time rumors reach Cersei's ears, her terror has shifted entirely. She no longer fears that Tyrion will embarrass the family. She fears that he will eclipse it, that when history remembers House Lannister, it will speak not of Joffrey Baratheon or even Tywin, but of the younger lion who learned to rule in their shadow and then stepped into their light. Would he still be hand? The path to power without pity in that fear, another question coils in Cersei's mind. If Tyrion can rule from the shadows, what happens when their father forces him into the light of the Iron Throne's court? Tywin hears the same rumors, but for him they are not whispers of wonder, they are reports, weighed and measured like ledgers. In canon, Tyrion is made hand because he is expendable, a shield of flesh between Joffrey's chaos and Lannister pride. Here, the calculus twists. This is his public heir, the son who resembles him in wit and in cold patience, the one whose victories in some distant village and minor castle now echo all the way to King's Landing. The war against Robb Stark still demands Tywin's full presence in the field. He continues to march, to scheme, to grind down northern resistance. Yet the capital remains a nest of daggers, Cersei's paranoia, Joffrey's cruelty, Littlefinger's quiet smiles. The hand of the king cannot be a mere puppet. It must be a Lannister mind that Tywin can trust, or at least predict. Jaime is bound to the Kingsguard, unable to inherit, unable to act freely. That leaves only one choice. So the summons goes out. Tyrion is called to his father's tent, not as a discarded son, but as an instrument. The scene is almost the same, yet entirely different. Tywin does not sneer about sending a dwarf to do a man's work. Instead, he studies his heir for a long, cold moment and lays out the terms like a contract. Go to King's Landing. Take the chain and the badge. Rule in my name while I win this war. He frames it as a test, and this only grows when he speaks of Casterly Rock. Succeed, and the rock draws closer. The ledgers, the mines, the banners, the legacy. Fail, and Tyrion proves every dark suspicion his father ever held about him. In Tywin's mind, there will be no excuses. A tall, healthy son has no shield of pity to hide behind. If he falls entirely on his own merits. As he grows up, Tyrion has dreamed of this kind of responsibility, of real power that is not a mockery. Yet when the badge lies in his palm, heavy as a sentence, he feels neither love nor acceptance. There is praise implied, but it is praise with a blade beneath it. Every decree he signs will strengthen his claim as heir, Every misstep will arm Cersei, Joffrey, and half the court with reasons to see him cast down. In King's Landing, that tension becomes his constant companion. He continues to walk the knife edge between duty and vengeance, between the father he hates and the name he still must protect. He studies wildfire yields, drills the city watch, bargains with Varys and Bronn, not as a ridiculed imp struggling for recognition, but as a looming rival whose competence terrifies his own blood. And as Stannis Baratheon's fleet gathers in Blackwater Bay, the true test approaches. The battle to come will not only decide the fate of the city, it will decide whether this alternate Tyrion Lannister cements his legend as Hand of the King, or dies in the green fire he dares to unleash. Blackwater Reforged, a respected commander, not a desperate imp. And as the green fire waits in its casks and chains, this test does not find Tyrion as a mocked jester of the court, but as a recognized commander whose word now carries the weight of steel. The Battle of Blackwater will still be written in wildfire and screams, yet the man at its center stands differently in the eyes of the realm. The pre-battle councils begin in the Tower of the Hand. The chamber is crowded. Hallyne, the pyromancer, members of the City Watch, Lannister captains, even some of the more cautious Goldcloak officers who once dismissed him. In canon, his plans are laughed at, brushed aside as the desperate tricks of a despised imp. Here, there is debate, but it is genuine debate. One captain questions the timing of the chain, another worries about Stannis' archers, and Tyrion answers them with calm, practiced authority, tracing routes on the map with the same hand that has held a sword on more than one muddy field. As he grows up in this version of the story, he has trained in the yard, ridden with patrols, spent cold nights in some nameless village garrison where he feels neither love nor acceptance from his father, but earns the rough respect of soldiers. When he speaks of staggered barricades in the streets, of fallback lines and kill zones, the gold cloaks listen, because many of them have already seen him drill beside them, laugh with them, bleed with them. He continues to lean on his intelligence, but now it is paired with a reputation for standing in the shield wall rather than hiding behind it. This only grows when he walks the mudgate with the captains on the eve of battle. He adjusts positions, shifts sellswords to reinforce weaker watchmen, and sends a detailed signal plan to the royal fleet so the wildfire trap and the chain will not work at cross purposes. In the canon battle, miscommunication and chaos rule the river. In this battle, the beacons and horns are arranged by a man who understands both charts and cavalry charges. The wildfire blast still annihilates much of Stannis' vanguard, but Lannister ships are better placed to avoid friendly fire, and the casualty patterns shift. More Baratheon sailors drown in the bay, fewer Lannister men burn on the quays. When the gate finally opens, Tyrion does not need to prove that he is brave. His presence in the vanguard feels inevitable, the expected courage of a Lannister prince rather than a freakish surprise. His helmet gleams, his cloak is crimson, and the men rally not out of astonishment, but out of habit. He shouts, "Forward!" and they go, because this is the same voice that has drilled them for weeks. The scar he takes on the bridge of his face still comes. The axe blow still fells him. But in the moments before he falls, he is a clear focal point of the defense, a commander whose orders knit the chaos into something like a plan. In the aftermath, the songs do not speak of a misshapen imp who stumbled into heroism. They speak of the Hand of the King who held the river, the Prince of Casterly Rock who turned wildfire and iron into victory. Around the Red Keep, nobles whisper not about how to sideline him, but about how dangerous it would be to oppose a man who now has both martial glory and the small folks' praise. His claim to power hardens. His status as potential heir to his father's legacy feels less like a cruel joke and more like an emerging reality. And as Tywin rides through the shattered gates to claim the credit, he finds a city already speaking the name of his youngest son with something uncomfortably close to reverence, a shift that will haunt every decision that follows. Die Shay without the pity dynamic. Love, lust, or transaction. In the echo of that reverence, another name begins to coil around Tyrion's story. Shay. When they first meet, she does not see an odd little man with a heavy purse and heavier wine. She sees a handsome Lannister with the lion's mane and the easy confidence of one who has walked both village mud and castle marble. a high-born client whose gaze could mean protection, punishment, or a path out of obscurity. Dangerous, rewarding, or both at once. The calculation in her eyes is sharper because the man before her is visibly eligible, socially powerful, and entirely aware of it. For Tyrion, the danger runs deeper. As he grows up, Tysha's ghost has never left his side. The memory of that stolen marriage, of his father's cruelty, sits behind every jest and every cup of wine. So when he takes Shae into his tent, and later into his chambers, he makes a quiet, ruthless choice. She will remain in the paid category. A camp follower, a comfort, an expense he can tally. He refuses to admit any deeper feeling, not to Varys, not to Bronn, not even to himself. Love is a battlefield he has already lost. This only grows when her behavior starts to shift. In canon, Shae clings to the coin and the safety, half amused by the broken little lion who clings back. Here, the balance tilts. Tyrion is no longer the despised dwarf clinging to a single warm body. He is the celebrated defender of the city, the possible heir whose father's praise still hangs just out of reach. Shae does not simply enjoy his gold. She begins to enjoy his status, his charisma, the way guards step aside when he passes, and lords lower their voices when he enters the hall. And it is during one of those quiet nights, as she lounges in silk he bought and jewels he borrowed from Lannister coffers, that the pattern interrupts. She asks not for more coin, but for a place closer to the court, closer to the center of things. Not just his bed, but his world. A Tyrion who feels neither love nor acceptance from his father, yet now moves through King's Landing with real authority. Reacts differently. He continues to guard Shae more carefully, less recklessly. He does not bring her openly into the Hand's Tower. He hides her in safer houses, uses trusted sellswords from his old company rather than half-loyal gold cloaks. His confidence has grown, his self-loathing has thinned, and that makes him colder in calculation. He knows how exposed a weakness can be in this castle, yet the knife still waits. A Shae who is drawn not to a desperate outcast, but to an ascending lord, will feel betrayal not when he fails to love her enough, but when he fails to raise her high enough. In this version, it may not be wounded vanity that turns her at the trial, but thwarted ambition. The destination remains the same. Only the road to her final fatal testimony begins to twist. And in that twist, the next betrayal Tyrion faces will cut far deeper than any blade.
The trial rewritten. Can you convict a golden heir so easily?
That blade falls at the wedding feast, but the wound truly opens in the throne room.
In canon, the trial of Tyrion Lannister is a public exorcism of a lifetime of whispers about the imp, a chance for King's Landing to spit on a man already treated as a monster.
Remove that body, remove that ready-made villain, and the spectacle must change. The court cannot simply lean on disgust. It must manufacture fear around a golden, capable heir who has worn his father's colors in battle and ruled the city in his name. The hall is the same, the faces are not. There are still nobles who resent Tyrion, still those who remember a sharp tongue and sharper commands during the Blackwater, but the open sneers are gone. Many in that crowded castle remember a different figure, the man who organized the defenses, who kept bread flowing, who walked the walls beside common soldiers while Joffrey hid. As he grows up into a respected administrator and de facto hand, he has earned, if not love, then a wary admiration that does not vanish overnight. So when Meryn Trant shuffles forward, his testimony lands differently. In the original tale, his word merely reinforces a story everyone already believes, the cruel, stunted uncle who threatened the king. Here, the Knight of the Kingsguard must paint a loyal Lannister heir as a secret traitor, and that strains belief. The same blows and slaps to Joffrey's pride are recalled, but now they sound like a hard-handed tutor disciplining a spoiled boy, not a bitter outcast taking revenge on his tormentor. Pycelle's turn follows. His quavering voice speaks of stolen poisons, of a hand who dared to chain him, of a man who humiliated him before the court. Yet against a Tyrion who has worn the lion's crimson with honor, who continues to manage the city's ledgers and granaries with cold efficiency, the maester's words feel petty, tinged with personal grievance more than righteous outrage. In this version, Shae's betrayal is not the easy cruelty of a camp follower spitting on a despised dwarf. It is the calculated strike of a woman who believed she would be raised, perhaps even openly installed in a lesser castle, and instead finds herself dismissed, hidden. She speaks of promises, of secret meetings, of whispered plans, and the court hears not a grotesque seducer, but a prince who took what he wished and then cast it aside. Yet even then, condemning him is no simple matter. This is the heir to Casterly Rock, the son who has handled western revenues, who has ridden circuit through village after village to enforce his father's justice. To strip him of life is to risk the anger of every lord who has feasted beneath Lannister banners and received his measured praise. The political cost is staggering. The Reach watches. The North, newly subjugated, listens. The Westerlands hold their breath. Tywin understands this better than anyone. The trial is still his stage, still his instrument to break a son he cannot control, but the sentence he shapes in his mind is different. Execution would waste an asset. Exile or disinheritance would remove a rival while preserving the lion's strength. Perhaps he imagines sending Tyrion back to the Free Companies, to the far side of the narrow sea, stripped of name and claim, yet alive, a tool to be recalled or discarded as needed. And standing there, hands bound, Tyrion feels neither love nor acceptance from the three judges on the dais. Yet he also feels the weight of those watching eyes. Survival no longer depends on shocking them into remembering he exists. It depends on calculating which future leaves him a path to strike back at his father. Does he still let rage master him and demand trial by combat? Or does the man who has learned to rule, to wait, to endure, choose a quieter, more terrible road? The words he speaks next will decide not only his fate, but the fate of every lion in the realm. Kinslayer in the dark, Tywin's death when the heir pulls the trigger. The words he speaks next do not save him, they damn him. In the wake of Shae's betrayal and the mockery of a trial, Tyrion chooses rage. He demands trial by combat, he loses Oberyn, and he is condemned. Yet when Varys comes in the dark with keys and whispers of escape, the path he walks through the Red Keep is not the stumbling shuffle of a despised dwarf. It is the measured stride of the man everyone has been trained to see as Tywin's true heir, a prince of the castle moving like a ghost through halls that once rang with his responsibilities. Armor fits his shoulders. His steps are long, confident, almost habitual, because as he grows up in this version of the story, he has walked these corridors as steward, as acting hand, as the son trusted to balance ledgers and overall bannermen. Now those same guards, half asleep at their posts, barely glance at a familiar silhouette. The very acceptance he fought for becomes the cloak that hides him. Shae waits in his father's bed. The scene is the same and yet far crueler. She calls him my lion, with the same lips that once praised his patience in council, his fairness with the small folk, his quiet care for a wounded girl smuggled from a village into safety. In this life, that pet name is not a joke at his expense. It is the private echo of a public truth. He is the Lion of the Rock, the heir who carries the future in his hands. So when her lies at the trial replay in his mind, when he sees the Lannister chain at her throat, the emotional violence cuts deeper. He feels neither love nor acceptance in that moment, only the abyss between what he offered and what she sold. The struggle is clumsy, desperate, more like a lover's quarrel turned nightmare than an assassin's efficient work. And when she lies still, the word lion hangs in the air like a curse upon him. Then comes Tywin. The confrontation on the privy keeps its familiar bones. Tasha, the lie about the camp followers. The lifelong lesson that his father's praise was a weapon, never a gift. Yet now Tywin is not merely losing a troublesome son. He is staring down the crossbow of the man he has shaped as his successor. The only remaining son who can inherit Casterly Rock, command the Westerlands, and hold the realm in check. Tywin's calm phrase, a hint of calculation enters his voice as he measures not just his life, but his legacy. This only grows when Tyrion spits back every slight, every orchestrated cruelty, and Tywin realizes that the perfect heir has memorized every wound. The bolt that kills him does more than pierce flesh. It severs the careful chain of succession he has spent a lifetime forging. Politically, the fallout is apocalyptic. A despised dwarf kinslayer is scandal. A beloved, legitimate heir-turned-kinslayer is a crisis that can shatter the West. Lords who bent the knee out of respect for Tywin's order now wonder if the line is cursed. Some whisper that Jaime's vows make him useless, that Cersei is unstable, that only distant cousins remain. Rivals in the Reach and the North scent blood in the water. Tyrion flees through the same hidden ways. But the man in the crate bound for Essos is not merely a fugitive, he is the executioner of his own house's future. The man who has decapitated House Lannister's line of succession with his own hands. As he continues to sail into exile, every wave against the hull sounds like a hammer striking a shattered lion's crown. And the question that hangs over the next part of his story is simple. What does a dispossessed heir do when he has already burned his own inheritance to ash? Varys' calculus, a different asset on the ship to Essos. What if the man on that dark ship to Essos is not a broken exile clinging to his wit alone, but a disinherited heir whose very name can still move armies and open gates? As Tyrion drinks in the stale cabin light and listens to the sea, Varys studies him with the patience of a man who has gambled his entire life on long odds. In canon, the spider spirits away a clever dwarf. An outsider in his body makes him expendable in the eyes of Westeros. Here he has something rarer, a legitimate battle-tested Lannister heir, a man who commanded sellswords, ruled a castle in his father's absence, and once walked through the halls of power expecting praise instead of scorn. Varys' long game has always rested on minds, not muscles. He values stories, secrets, the quiet loyalties of those who feel neither love nor acceptance in the great courts. Tyrion, as he grows up in this altered life, has still been that man. Yet this only grows when the spider realizes that the kinslayer across from him is also the last viable male of House Lannister, a potential claimant to Casterly Rock whose name can legitimize rebellions in the Westerlands and sway cautious lords in King's Landing. That changes their dynamic. On the voyage, Varys must treat Tyrion less as a discarded piece to be hidden behind a dragon queen, and more as a blade with two edges, a possible kingmaker or kingbreaker. Every cup of wine refilled, every quiet question about Tywin, Cersei, and Jaime becomes an investment. The spider does not simply shepherd a useful advisor toward Daenerys, he escorts a man who could, with the right allies, rival half the pretenders of the War of the Five Kings. Tyrion feels it as well. Guilt over kinslaying gnaws at him, the memory of his father's face, the weight of the crossbow, the knowledge that he has personally shattered his own house's succession. Yet beneath the self-loathing lies a colder awareness. His name still matters. In the Free Cities, a Lannister with sellsword experience, coin sense, and a ruined but famous father is a bargaining chip. On that cramped ship, he continues to rehearse possibilities in his mind. Service to a Targaryen queen, alliance with a hidden Blackfire pretender, even the chance to carve out a regional power base in the Westerlands if Varys' plots tear the realm apart. And here the pattern breaks. Varys, who once placed all his hopes in Daenerys alone, must at least imagine alternatives. Could Tyrion be paired to a claimant besides the Dragon Queen, married into some half-forgotten Targaryen cousin, or set up as a stabilizing lord in the West while another sits the Iron Throne? The spider does not decide yet, but the very existence of those paths shows how dangerous this man has become. By the time Meereen's harbors rise out of the haze, Varys is delivering to Daenerys not just a clever counselor, but a dispossessed heir whose presence will test her pride, her trust, and her vision for the Seven Kingdoms. Meeting the dragon, how Daenerys sees a lion without chains, the harbors of Meereen shimmer in the heat, and with them comes a different kind of storm. What if the man stepping off the ship toward Daenerys Targaryen is not a broken exile, but a tall Lannister prince who has killed his father and carries his house like a blood-stained banner? Let's explore the depths of that first meeting. The throne room of Meereen is heavy with incense and foreign eyes. Daenerys sits upon the great seat of carved wood and harpy wings, flanked by Unsullied, with Daario, Missandei, and Ser Barristan close at hand. Into that hall, under the watchful gaze of dragons chained in the dark below, strides Tyrion Lannister. Not the twisted imp from another telling, but a handsome, compact man in crimson and gold, bearing the poise of a castle-bred heir who has commanded men and bargained with kings. He bows, but not too low. He speaks, but not too humbly. He presents himself as what he is, the disinherited son of Tywin, kinslayer, fugitive, and yet still a lion of Casterly Rock. Daenerys studies his face, the easy confidence, the practiced courtesy. In that moment he feels neither love nor acceptance in this foreign court, only the cool appraisal of a queen who has learned that every gift in Essos comes with chains. Her first instinct is distrust. He is still a Lannister. He still carries the name worn by the men who funded Robert's rebellion, who stood smiling as her father burned and her brothers died. Without the visible mark of dwarfism, he resembles those hunters more closely. The same golden hair, the same green eyes, the same effortless grace that once walked the halls of the Red Keep. This only grows when she hears the word kinslayer, when she learns he put a crossbow bolt through his father on the privy. Yet he continues to speak, and what he offers is not apology, it is a trade. He lays out his knowledge of Westeros with a cold, methodical precision. The rivalries of the great houses, the temper of the faith, the weakness behind the Iron Throne. He offers the weight of his name, the idea that a Lannister in her service will sow doubt in the West, and he offers his theoretical claim to Casterly Rock as a tool, a threat, or a promise. As he grows up in his own telling, each humiliation and each responsibility becomes another stone in the road that has led him to her feet. Around them, whispers begin. A dragon queen and a lion prince, fire and gold. A marriage that could bind West and East in a single spectacle of power. Dario's eyes narrow, Barristan's jaw tightens, and Missandei quietly notes how often politics dresses itself in the language of love and praise. Daenerys hears the murmur of alliance, of legitimacy, of a union that could make the lords of the Westerlands tremble. In the end, her choice is measured and cold. She does not keep him because he is pitiable, or because his brokenness mirrors her own. She keeps him because a sharp, dispossessed lion is too useful to waste, because a man who has killed his father and burned his bridges cannot easily turn back. She sets him close, not at her side as husband, not yet, but within reach as counselor and hostage both, knowing that the next step in her conquest will be written in his clever, dangerous hands. Hand of the Dragon? Tyrion's counsel in a world that takes him seriously. So what happens when that clever, dangerous hand is given real weight in a court that actually listens to him? What if Tyrion Lannister, no longer dismissed as a broken thing, becomes the calm center of the storm around Daenerys Targaryen? In Meereen, the first test is the slavers. The pyramids still stink of old blood. The harbours still remember chains. But the debates in her council chamber change. When the masters of Yunkai and Astapor threaten war, Tyrion does not speak as a despised exile begging to be heard. He speaks as a man who has already ruled a castle, balanced ledgers and broken sieges. He argues for hostages, for staggered emancipation, for buying time with gold and promises while the lion's venture grows. He urges her to make a spectacle of justice, not merely a spectacle of fire, to hang a few masters and spare the rest as living examples. This only grows when the question of sailing to Westeros returns again and again. Others urge haste, dragons, and sudden conquest. Tyrion counsels patience. He has seen how quickly a kingdom can turn on a ruler who wins battles, but loses grain. How a village that cheers one day can starve the next. He continues to press for ports secured, supply lines mapped, and allies wooed in Dawn and the Reach before her banners ever cross the narrow sea. His words carry more weight now because he is not merely a curiosity in her court, but a proven heir who once managed the Westerlands' mines and musters. Yet every step forward sharpens the tension between them. Her Targaryen idealism insists that the wheel must be broken, that old houses must burn. His Lannister pragmatism answers that some wheels can be turned instead, that frightened nobles can be bent with hostages, marriages, and debt. When she speaks of raising Lannisport in vengeance for the sack of King's Landing, he feels neither love nor acceptance for the place that raised him, only a grim responsibility. He offers a colder alternative. Take the harbour, spare the small folk, strip the great houses of ships and silver, and let their banners fall from hunger rather than dragonfire. As he grows up beside her in power, not in years, Daenerys begins to see the advantage of a lion who has broken from his pride. In this world, she names him Hand earlier, and with ceremony meant to send a message across 2 continents. A Lannister kneels beneath a Targaryen banner, the golden hand clasped round the 3-headed dragon, and the sight alone shakes courts from Sunspear to Old Town. It is not only his mind she crowns, but his symbolism, a great house's cast-off son now sworn to the last dragon. Yet the question lingers beneath every council meeting, every late-night argument over maps and cities. Does his steady counsel pull her back from the edge, or does his own buried bitterness, his quiet dreams of Lannister ruin, give shape to her darkest impulses? The answer will be written not in Meereen's dust, but in the first city they choose to burn together. Marriage markets and power plays. Who would this Tyrion wed? That first city, that first fire, grows from choices made long before Meereen. It grows from contracts signed in distant ports, from a father's cold calculations in a Westerosi castle, from the question of whose hand this taller Tyrion is meant to hold. In Westeros, marriage is just another battlefield, and Tywin Lannister has always preferred to fight on ground he chooses. With a son who looks every inch the golden heir, the range of suitors widens brutally. Sansa Stark remains an option not as a grotesque punishment for a broken girl, but as a visibly enviable match, the future of Casterly Rock, bound to the North's last known daughter. Lords would whisper, not in disgust, but in envy, watching a Stark maiden led to a handsome lion instead of the despised imp. As he grows up, this changes the air around Tyrion at court. Tyrion eyes linger longer. A younger Marjorie, or one of her cousins, could easily be dangled as bait. Highgarden trying to secure both King's Landing and Casterly Rock in a web of roses and gold. In Dorne, a Martell princess or paramour might be proposed, Oberyn and Doran calculating that a respected Lannister husband is a safer bridge than a monster mocked in every tavern. Even proud riverlords, Fraser side, would angle daughters toward him, dreaming of their banners flying beneath the lion's shadow. The Sansa match, when it comes, shifts in tone, but not in cruelty. The wedding is still rushed, still coerced, still a cage. Yet Sansa's terror wraps itself around different thorns. She fears Lannister power, Lannister arrogance, Lannister victory, not the sight of a twisted body beside her bed. He feels neither love nor acceptance from her at first, only the stiff politeness of a hostage who has memorized her courtesies. This only grows when he continues to show restraint, to keep his distance on their wedding night, to treat her less as spoils and more as a person whose trust he cannot simply claim. Without the physical revulsion, space opens for something more complicated. Sansa can hate his name, his father, his red-cloaked guards, and still, slowly, acknowledge the man who listens when she speaks of Winterfell. Respect does not erase fear, but it can sit beside it, a quiet, unwelcome guest at the feast. Yet Tywin's gaze never rests. A Stark bride is valuable, but with a flawless son, he might aim higher still, dreaming of a union to rival the Baratheon Lannister crown, a Targaryen exile reclaimed, a Reach alliance perfected, a southern kingdom drawn under Lannister rule by marriage alone. Tyrion's romantic life, in this world, ceases to be a desperate hunt for scraps of affection in brothels and back rooms. Instead, it becomes another ledger of responsibilities, another weight on his shoulders, a parade of faces, promises, and alliances, all demanding that he play the dutiful heir while his own hunger for love and praise goes unanswered. And somewhere across the sea, a silver-haired queen waits, not as fantasy, but as the most dangerous match of all. Because what happens when the man built for dynastic expectation finally meets the woman who means to break dynasties entirely? Would he still love the broken? Bastards, cripples, and this new Tyrion, and that is the question that haunts him more than crowns or castles. If he is no longer broken in body, will he still stand with the broken in spirit? As he grows up under Tywin's roof, that answer is not obvious. In canon, his bond with Jon Snow is born in a moment of shared recognition on the wall, 2 outcasts trading hard truths in the cold. Here, when he rides north as a polished Westerland's heir rather than a spectacle, That first drink with Jon changes. It is less two wounded creatures huddling together, more a powerful man choosing to acknowledge a bastard's hurt. When he tells Jon that all dwarfs are bastards in their father's eyes, the words land differently. He feels neither love nor acceptance, but his body no longer proves the point for him. The kinship must be earned, not assumed. This only grows when he meets Bran. In another life, the dwarf who jokes about saddles is speaking from a lifetime of stares and mockery. In this one, the suggestion still comes, but from long days spent in the yard with boys who will never be knights, from hours listening to maimed miners in a village tavern speak of crushed legs and lost wages. Tywin's contempt, the way his father withholds praise and uses him as a blunt instrument of policy, still carves the same hollow places in his chest. The shape of the pain is different, yet the lesson is the same. Power can be taken in an instant, and those without it bleed the longest, because Tywin continues to send him among the small folk, first as punishment, then as habit. He hears petitions in some drafty hall, settles quarrels over muddy strips of field, rides out to a burned village and counts the dead. Each minor duty teaches him how fragile protection really is. When he later stands in a council chamber and must decide whether to squeeze a town for coin or forgive the tax after a bad harvest, the choice is no longer abstract. He has seen the faces behind the numbers. So when real power finally arrives, command of the Lion's Venture, a say in Daenerys' councils, the tension sharpens. He can sell his company to the highest bidder or bargain for better treatment of freedmen. He can advise a queen to crucify masters or to break the wheel more slowly. Every time, the story asks whether he will remember the boy in the village or only the son who was never given praise. His treatment of those beneath him becomes the clearest mirror. Podrick is not a convenient shield, but a nervous squire he trains carefully, testing his courage, yet never discarding him. Bronn is not just a sellsword on a leash. He is a man Tyrion pays fairly, argues with, and trusts with hard tasks, even when that trust might cost him. In Meereen, Missandei is no mere translator. He listens to her counsel on the freedmen, shares wine with her on the palace steps, and lets her correct him when his Westerosi assumptions fail. He continues to surround himself with those the world calls lesser, but the question is whether he treats them as tools or as partners. In the end, this may be the heart of the what if. If his body no longer marks him as broken, do his choices still align him with bastards, cripples, and broken things? Or without dwarfism, does Tyrion risk becoming the very lion that once devoured him? The answer will decide not only his soul, but the fate of the queen waiting across the sea. The War of the Five Kings on hard mode. A sharper Lannister opponent, if Tyrion's soul will decide the queen's fate, it will first decide the fate of a continent already on fire. The War of the Five Kings still begins with a dead hand, a direwolf and a crown, but the balance tilts the moment a taller Tyrion rides through the gates of King's Landing as acknowledged heir of Casterly Rock. He has his father's ring on his finger, his father's mandate in his saddlebags, and enough visible authority that even Cersei must grit her teeth and listen. As he grows up, Tywin has used him as a blunt instrument in council, and this only grows when Jaime joins the Kingsguard, leaving Tyrion as the son meant to rule the castle after his father's death. Ned Stark's downfall still comes, but it is cleaner, sharper, and far less chaotic. Tyrion cannot save Ned's life once Joffrey speaks the fatal command, yet he can shape the aftermath. Instead of a sadistic boy king improvising cruelty, there is a Lannister heir forcing the crown to honor the original bargain. Sansa kept as honored hostage, Arya hunted, but not with open bounties that scandalize the realm. Letters dispatched to Winterfell and Riverrun offering terms before swords. He continues to argue that a swift exchange of prisoners and a face-saving confession would bleed the North's rage, not feed it. At the Blackwater, the change becomes unmistakable. This is not the mocked imp leading from the shadows. This is the Prince of the Rock standing on the walls, armor bright, voice steady. His authority compels obedience when he orders the Hound's men back to the lines. He still lights the wildfire, still chains the bay, but he also sends ravens ahead of time, offering Stannis a parley, a seat on the council, and the language of shared duty rather than pure defeat. Stannis, grim and rigid, may reject it, Yet the realm hears that a Lannister has at least tried to spare lives. The Red Wedding becomes the true test. With more clout, Tyrion is not informed after the fact. He is consulted before the plot is sealed. He feels neither love nor acceptance from his father, but he understands the cost of butchering guest right. He counsels a slower strangling of the North, divide Robb from his bannermen with gold and pardons, use Edmure's marriage to bind, not betray. Tywin wants a single savage stroke. Tyrion offers 3 subtler cuts. In this version, the twins may still run red, yet the slaughter is narrower, the singers less horrified, the stain on Lannister honor less indelible. Beyond each battle, his growing reputation as a negotiator reshapes perception. Robb Stark hears of a Lannister who ransoms captives fairly. Renly Baratheon imagines a future where a charming Western prince marries Marjorie instead of Joffrey. Even Stannis, hearing reports from Davos, must admit that this lion at least speaks of law before fire. If Tywin had truly accepted this son, if praise had matched responsibilities, House Lannister might leave the war not merely alive, but unassailable. A secure north, under generous terms, a fractured Baratheon claim carefully managed, a realm tired of blood, yet grudgingly grateful for the man who ended it. The chilling question is simple. If the Lions win so completely in the war, what happens when that same heir finally turns his gaze across the narrow sea? Darkest timeline. When acceptance makes Tyrion more ruthless, and now imagine that gaze turning not outward first, but inward, onto the rock itself. After the war, the banners are dismissed, the gold tallied, the songs already twisting truth into flattery. In this quieter aftermath, Tywin calls his surviving son to the solar. No court, no witnesses, only father and heir, and the weight of generations pressing down from the stone above. The old lion studies the younger, remembers the Battle of Blackwater, the careful treaties, the way the small folk in every village along the Gold Road bowed with something like genuine respect. Tywin does something he has never done before. He speaks the words plainly. Tyrion, Casterly Rock will be yours. It is a simple sentence. It is also a tectonic shift. For a man who has spent his whole life believing that he feels neither love nor acceptance, hearing that open acknowledgement from his father lands like a blessing and a curse in the same breath, the boy who once drank and jested to dull the ache suddenly sees a straight road before him, carved in Lannister red and gold. He is no longer merely the clever son, he is the heir. As he grows up into this role, something in him hardens. Praise from Tywin is rare, but now it comes. Precise and conditional. A well-managed famine here, a crushed smuggler ring there, a rebellious knight quietly ruined rather than publicly executed. Each success earns a nod, a single approving word, and Tyrion learns to crave it with the same hunger that once drove him to wine and whores. He continues to measure every decision against one question. Will this keep his father's regard? This fragile, glittering thing he has finally been allowed to touch. This only grows when he finds himself repeating Tywin's maxims without thinking. A lion does not concern himself with the opinions of the sheep. Once, that line might have been armor against cruelty. Now, with the rock promised and the realm half tamed, it becomes justification. A village complains about new tariffs, the levy remains, but the loudest voices quietly disappear into impressment for the mines. A minor house drags its feet on oaths. Their hostages are educated at the castle in a way that looks very much like gilded imprisonment. Here the pattern breaks. In canon, his rejection breeds a crooked compassion. The man who loves bastards and broken things, who risks himself for a frightened child bride, who spares enemy small folk when others would burn them out. In this darker line, the same intelligence moves in colder channels. He still remembers Tysha, still remembers what power used to do to him, but now he tells himself that his own harshness prevents greater horrors. If he must be ruthless to keep Tywin's love, then the world will simply have to endure a more efficient cruelty. And so a final question lingers, bitter as dregs at the bottom of a cup. Is the kinder world the one where Tyrion is broken but empathetic, or the one where he stands whole, praised, and monstrously willing to do anything to remain so? Pattern break. What if Tyrion never leaves Westeros at all? And if that question tastes bitter, then the next one is stranger still. What if Tyrion never crossed the narrow sea at all? Instead of a desperate escape and a crossbow in the privy, imagine the trial ending with calculation rather than chaos. Tywin has an heir who is not a dwarf, a son whose victories in war and governance have already brought praise from lords and smallfolk alike. Publicly, the father cannot spare him without looking weak. Privately, he cannot waste an heir who has proven too valuable to discard. So the sentence becomes a performance, and the true punishment is arranged behind closed doors. In this version, there is no trial by combat, no Varys with a crate and a ship to Essos. There is only a quiet decree that Tyrion will retire to Casterly Rock, stripped of his place at court, but loaded with new, suffocating responsibilities. Officially, he is being removed for the good of the realm. In truth, Tywin is pushing his troublesome son back into the stone womb of the castle that birthed him, turning the rock into a gilded prison for its future lord. As he grows up into this role of confined heir, he feels neither love nor acceptance from the court that condemned him, only the cold comfort of Westerland's gold and stone. Yet he continues to do what he has always done: observe, calculate, prepare. While King's Landing seethes, the Western lords still ride to his halls, bringing gossip of the Iron Throne, of Stannis, of the Golden Company, of a silver-haired queen gathering strength across the sea. This only grows when the first reports of dragons reach the western harbours. Merchants whisper of black wings over Marine, of Unsullied marching in perfect lines. Tyrion listens, and the rock slowly shifts from provincial stronghold to potential counterweight. Grain is stockpiled, ports are quietly expanded, old debts with minor houses are forgiven, and new oaths are taken in private chambers where his father's shadow cannot reach. By the time Daenerys lands in Westeros, the West is no longer just another region to be claimed. It is a realm within the realm, ruled by a man who has studied every weakness of King's Landing from the inside. Tyrion can open his gates to the Iron Throne or close them and bargain. He can send his banners to burn for the crown or hold them back and wait for dragons to do the burning for him. In one path, he sells the Lannister host to Cersei or another monarch, becoming the indispensable shield of the capital. In another, he withholds that shield, letting the city bleed until the price of his support is nothing less than a second capital in all but name, a western court where petitioners bow first to the Lord of Casterly Rock before daring to face the Iron Throne. And above it all, the cold comes. When the White Walkers advance, every region that can act alone gains terrifying leverage. A lord who can feed his people, arm his levies, and close his mountain gates becomes a kingmaker simply by surviving. Tyrion's castles, mines, and ports make him that kind of lord. He can choose to stand as the realm's bulwark, or to let rival houses shatter themselves and arrive late as savior. Then, pull back. This is only one branch, one speculative exile behind stone instead of sea. Yet it reveals how many hinges hide inside that single moment at his trial. A crossbow fired or unfired. A ship taken or refused. A father choosing spectacle or strategy. Each choice decides whether Tyrion becomes fugitive, foreign counselor, or western kingmaker, and in each case, the fate of dragons, dead men, and thrones bends quietly around him. The main timeline returns to Essos, but that shadow of the rock remains, a reminder of how close Westeros came to having two capitals instead of one. Identity without the body. What truly makes Tyrion Tyrion? The main timeline returns to Essos, but that shadow of the rock lingers over him, a silent question carved in stone. If the body changes, does the man remain? In this version, Tyrion stands straight-backed, broad-shouldered, a Lannister in full, yet the story keeps circling the same uneasy core. When most think of Tyrion, they think first of the mind, his wit that cuts like a razor in a dimly lit hall, his love of books, of histories and ledgers and half-forgotten prophecies, his empathy for the downtrodden, for bastards and camp followers and the nameless dead in burned villages, his self-destructive streak that drives him to cups, to brothels, to gambles with his own life, his hunger for love and respect, for a word of praise from his father, for acceptance from a world that has never known what to do with him. In canon, much of this is chained directly to his dwarfism. Denied the sword, he turns to the page. Mocked in the castle yard, he learns to win in the council chamber. Called a monster, he clings to those even more despised than himself, and as he grows up, he learns their names and their stories because no one ever bothered to learn his. He feels neither love nor acceptance from Tywin, from Cersei, from the lords who snicker behind their goblets. The wound festers into armor made of wine and words. Strip away the dwarfism and some causes shift, but the traits do not simply vanish. Tywin still names him the boy who killed his mother. Jaime still rides away in white, and this only grows when Tyrion is pushed forward as heir in truth, then yanked back whenever his father needs a reminder of Joanna's grave. The love of books now comes not only as compensation for a frail body, but as the natural weapon of a second son turned administrator, buried in accounts and treaties while other men win songs. His empathy for the downtrodden grows from years of dealing with minor lords and small folk, from seeing how a careless order from the Rock can starve a village far below. Other edges change. Without a lifetime of being spat on in taverns, his bitterness softens at the margins. Without open mockery in the throne room, his self-destructive urges take longer to bloom. Yet the fundamental conflict remains intact, the better angels that push him toward justice and mercy, and the Lannister upbringing that whispers of power, gold, and ruthless precedent. He continues to measure himself against Tywin's impossible standard, continues to reach for love in the very places that will destroy him. In that tension, the old argument between nature, nurture, and circumstance plays itself out. The body shapes how the world treats him. The father shapes how he learns to answer. The wars and prophecies and betrayals give him the stage on which to choose. The real Tyrion may lie less in his stature and more in that choice, in how he answers a world determined to define him before he speaks. And the true test of that answer comes when his greatest chance at love, vengeance, and power stands before him at once, and he must decide which Tyrion walks away.
Would the ending change?
A lion's role in the final game, in the endgame, that choice is not abstract. It stands on Dragonback above King's Landing, in a queen's clenched jaw and a city's terrified silence. Daenerys still walks the same path of loss, betrayal, and righteous fury. The bells still ring. The Red Keep still looms, a symbol of every broken promise in Westeros. Yet a taller Tyrion, a true Lannister heir whose counsel carries the weight of a great castle and a greater name, stands beside her with a different kind of authority. He is not the amusing imp to be indulged and then ignored. He is the man who broke his father, who bent the Westerlands, who can promise or withhold their acceptance. Does that change the fire that follows? It may not erase the rage, but it reshapes the moment. When he begs her to spare the city, he speaks not only as Hand, but as the last adult lion of Casterly Rock, the one who understands that Ash wins no tax, no praise, no lasting throne. He continues to frame mercy not as weakness but as strategy, reminding her that a living, fearful population is a greater weapon than ruins. This only grows when he offers something brutal of his own. Cersei delivered alive, the Lannister guards disarmed, the gates opened by his hand. A sacrifice of blood instead of a sacrifice of a city. And yet, Daenerys' descent is not only about counsel ignored, it is about a wound that no wise word can stitch. Even with a more commanding Tyrion, the pattern of betrayal in Meereen, in Westeros, in her own family, still coils around her. The bells might still become a trigger, the sky might still burn, but the hesitation before the first pass of Drogon's shadow feels longer, heavier, as if the realm itself holds its breath. After the fire, the Dragon Pit Council changes more clearly. A tall Tyrion is not dragged before lords as a despised curiosity. He is presented in chains as the last legitimate male Lannister, a man whose decisions killed his father, his king, and a city. Some remember the fair judgments in a minor village court, the steady administration of Lannisport, the sellsword company that paid its debts. Others remember that he strangled Shae and shot Tywin on the privy, A pattern interrupt arrives when Edmure or another cautious lord, instead of being mocked, quietly suggests Tyrion himself. A proven hand, a Westerosi-born heir, a man with no children and little reason to continue any dynasty but stabilities. For a moment, the idea hangs there, a lion on the throne, a dragon as memory, the North as wary partner. Tyrion refuses. He has seen too much of kings, and he feels neither love nor acceptance for that iron seat. Instead, he casts his vote for Bran, still arguing that the boy who fell and rose again carries a different story than any lord. His sentence shifts as well. Exile remains, but not as a simple banishment. Rebuilding the Night's Watch becomes a deliberate act of penance, a way to bind a once great house to the cold margin of the world. Some demand his head for regicide and treason. Others argue that a Lannister in black, commanding the Wall's ruins, is a better warning than any execution. So he walks north, taller, straighter, but no less burdened. Snow crunches under his boots as he passes through the broken gate, the wind tearing at his cloak. Behind him lie burned cities, dead fathers, lost queens. Ahead, only a shattered order and a haunted horizon. As he grows up into this final role, not as heir or hand, but as warden of forgotten things, the ghosts do not lessen, they only change their shapes. The same questions follow him into the dark. What was saved? What was lost? And whether a different body ever could have changed the soul that made those choices. And somewhere beyond the wall, where old stories still walk, the last lion of Casterly Rock disappears into the snow, searching for a future that does not yet have his name on it. Book back to canon. The one scene you'll never watch the same way, and it is in that snow, in that vanishing lion's trail, that another image rises to meet him. One room, one chair, one crossbow. One scene that, in this telling, cannot remain the same. The Tower of the Hand is quiet. The torches burn low, their light catching on red and gold, on polished wood and cold stone. Tyrion stands in the doorway with the bow in his hands. The same son, the same murderer, but not the same figure that once limped through this chamber in chains. He is taller now, broad-shouldered beneath travel-stained leathers, the bearing of an heir who has worn command like a second skin. Tywin looks up from the privy, and for the first time in his life the father truly sees the man his decisions have made. In canon, the insult of the moment rests partly in the contrast. The great lion brought low by the son he mocked as a twisted, stunted thing. Here, that mockery is gone, and something colder takes its place. This is not the freak striking back at his tormentor. This is the rightful heir of Casterly Rock passing final judgment on the lord who spent a lifetime withholding love and praise. When Tyrion speaks, the words are almost the same. The accusations of Tysha, of a childhood in which he feels neither love nor acceptance, of years of being used as a tool and discarded as a liability. Yet every line now carries the weight of a man the realm respects, not ridicules. Lords have watched him drill sellswords, settle disputes in some half-forgotten village, hold a castle through siege and famine. Knights who once laughed behind their hands now remember his calm in battle, his measured orders, the way he continues to place responsibilities above his own safety. This only grows when the background shifts. Imagine the guards outside the door, hearing the raised voices. In the show, their shock is tinged with a cruel satisfaction, the monster turning at last on the monster who sired him. Here, they trade unsettled glances for another reason. They are watching history pivot. If this man kills his father, it is not a grotesque curiosity, it is the slaying of a living legend, by the very son, groomed, in all but affection, to inherit his mantle. Varys, waiting in the shadows beyond, understands it at once. The balance of the realm tilts differently when the killer is not a despised dwarf, but a proven commander whose name smallfolk in the Westerlands speak with cautious respect. As he grows up in this version of events, every small victory, every quiet act of justice, has layered meaning onto this one confrontation until the bolt loosed into Tywin's chest carries not just rage, but the accumulated verdict of a lifetime. Seen through this lens, the entire what-if narrows to a single heartbeat in that tower. A different body, a different reputation, the same wound over Tysha, the same hunger for acceptance, all converging on one choice. If only this one scene could be changed by changing Tyrion's body, would the realm be witnessing justice or the first crack in a better future that might have been? Meta pattern interrupt. Why this what if hits harder than dragons, and this is where the thought experiment cuts deeper than dragons or prophecies. Changing Tyrion's body in that tower does not simply alter one man's fate, it exposes the machinery that has been grinding him down since the day he was born. In the canon story, his dwarfism is the excuse, the mask that Westeros wears over its own cruelty. The jeers in the village square, the sniggers in the castle hall, the way even highborn lords treat him as a walking jest or a convenient scapegoat, all of it teaches him early that he feels neither love nor acceptance unless he pays for it in wine, in wit, in self-deprecation. As he grows up, the realm tells itself that this is about his body, that his suffering is unfortunate but inevitable, when in truth it is a choice made again and again by those with power. This what-if strips that excuse away. A tall Tyrion still walks into rooms where his father refuses him praise, where Cersei's eyes still narrow with blame, where every failure of House Lannister can still be pinned to the boy who killed his mother. The insult can no longer hide behind his height. It becomes obvious that the same instincts that pushed him towards books and strategy, that honed his tongue into a weapon because his hands could not lift a knight's shield, are responses to a society that decides who is useful and who is disposable based on appearance, on difference, on what body stands before it. In that sense, this story is not about fixing Tyrion, it is about forcing the camera to linger on the invisible architecture around him. The small council that laughs at cripples and broken things, the trials where rumor about his monstrous nature matters more than evidence, the way his responsibilities in canon are handed out, precisely because he is expendable. When those same patterns cling to him even as a proper heir, they reveal themselves as prejudice laid into the foundations of the world, not a tragic but natural response to one man's shape. And Tywin's cruelty, seen through this lens, becomes something even starker. If Tyrion's body no longer offends him, if the heir before him bears the right face, the right hair, the right Lannister poise, then what remains is the raw, unsoftened truth. A father who cannot forgive the loss of Joanna, who cannot bear a son that mirrors his own failures, who clings to control and legacy so fiercely that he continues to grind his children down to fit the story he demands they play. This only grows when Tyrion wins victories Tywin never planned, when the supposed weakest child becomes the most dangerous. So this is the real pattern interrupt. Not dragons over King's Landing, but the realization that the game was rigged against Tyrion long before his first insult. In the next section, the tale returns to the battlefield and the council chamber, setting Canon Tyrion beside this alternate lion and measuring moment by moment what changes, what never does, and what that says about the realm that made them both. Two Tyrions, two realms, side by side, lives compared. The tale now splits like a sword through water. On one side stands the canon dwarf, mocked in every hall, surviving by wit and a hard-won empathy. On the other, the tall heir, moving through the same castles and the same wars with status as his shield and strategy as his blade. As he grows up in the original story, Tyrion learns early that he feels neither love nor acceptance from his father. Tywin sees a twisted reminder of Joanna's death, something to be hidden or used, never praised. In the alternate realm, the face is the same, the golden hair the same, but the body is unremarkable, even promising. Tywin still sees the boy who killed his wife, yet this only grows when that boy proves capable, dutiful, and dangerously independent. The insult is not his stature now, but his refusal to be a silent heir. With Jaime, the split screen tightens. Canon Tyrion adores the one Lannister who treats him as a brother, not a burden. Their bond is forged in shared jokes and quiet rescues from Tywin's wrath. The tall Tyrion still finds Jaime as his first mirror, chasing his praise on the training yard, then replacing him as heir when the White Cloak steals Jaime from Casterly Rock. In both lives, he continues to measure himself against that brother. Only the yardstick changes, from height and swordplay to command and inheritance. Cersei, meanwhile, barely changes at all. In canon, she looks at the dwarf and sees a monster, In the alternate line, she looks at the heir and sees a rival. Her cruelty in King's Landing, her readiness to blame him for Joffrey's death, her willingness to twist Shae against him, these remain. The shape of the hatred alters, but the venom is the same. Love and lust diverge more sharply. Canon Tyrion clings to Shae because she offers an illusion of acceptance in a world that calls him imp. The tall Tyrion meets Shae from a position of power, not desperation, and the imbalance is clearer, more calculated. Tysha, once a wound that curdles into self-loathing, becomes in this new path a vow of vengeance that sends him across the narrow sea. His steps towards Daenerys differ too. One arrives as a broken exile in chains, the other as a hardened captain with 1,000 men. Yet in both cases, the Dragon Queen finds in him a mind that can read a city, a siege, a people. Politically, the canon dwarf becomes Hand of the King because he is expendable. His victories at the Blackwater save a realm that will not thank him, and his kinslaying shatters what little place he held. The alternate Tyrion is never expendable. He is heir, negotiator, kingmaker. He may end ruling a western coast or steering Daenerys toward a bloodless victory that canon never knew. Which man harms more, which saves more, which leaves the villages and castles of Westeros better guarded? That answer remains uncertain. Both are prisoners of the same lion's den, only their cages differ. One barred by mockery, the other by expectation. And when those two cages finally collide, when the dwarf's scars meet the heir's ambitions, the realm itself will be forced to decide which Tyrion it truly deserves. Final reflection. What we learn about power, prejudice, and choice, both are prisoners of the same lion's den, but the bars tell a deeper story. Removing the chains from Tyrion's body does not free his soul, it only changes the shape of the cage that surrounds him. In one life he is mocked as a monster, in this life he is measured as an heir. That is the central revelation of this entire thought experiment. Take away his dwarfism and the insults at court, and the realm does not suddenly offer him love, praise, or easy acceptance. Instead, it burdens him with different expectations, different suspicions, different demands for perfection. In King's Landing, the small folk whisper less about his stature and more about his ambition. In every village and castle he passes through, lords judge him not by how he walks, but by how ruthlessly he can hold power. The world still tries to break him, it simply chooses new tools. This only grows when the story turns back to Tywin. The father's hatred in both timelines is born in the same blood-soaked bedchamber, beside the same dead wife, under the same golden banners. As he grows up, Tyrion searches for reasons, for some flaw in his body or in his mind that might explain why he feels neither love nor acceptance from the man whose name he carries. Yet the truth that emerges here is harsher. Tywin's loathing is not anchored to Tyrion's height, but to Joanna's absence, and to a legacy he fears will crumble. That grief is tragically portable. It clings to a dwarf. It clings just as tightly to a perfect son. So, in this Westeros, the pressure simply shifts. Instead of being dismissed, Tyrion is watched. Instead of being underestimated, he is tested. He continues to face the same father's cold calculations, the same sister's paranoia, the same court's hunger for a scapegoat. Only the pretext changes. The wound beneath remains the same. Yet amid all that, something else becomes clear. Whether he is mocked as the imp or paraded as the rightful heir, his true power has never come only from circumstance. It comes from choice. He chooses to listen to the complaints of a frightened village instead of ignoring them. He chooses to spare enemies when Tywin would burn their houses. He chooses to bend his sellsword company toward discipline rather than cruelty, to guide Daenerys toward negotiation before fire. Each decision, each quiet refusal to become the man his father expects, reshapes the game more than his body ever could. There is a quieter question beneath this as well. In any life, which parts of a person are truly chosen, and which are carved into them by other people's expectations? Tyrion's lion's mane and green eyes are inherited. His bitterness is taught, his mercy is fought for again and again. As he grows up in this altered world, Every step toward kindness is taken uphill, and this is only one hill, one path, one branch on an endless tree of possible Westeroses. Change his body, change his mother's fate, change the moment Maggie the Frog speaks of love across the sea, and a different realm unfolds. The next branch waits, and with it, another answer to what power, prejudice, and choice can build or destroy. Your turn. Rewrite one scene, one choice, one lion in that endless forest of branches. One question hangs heavier than the rest, bending the bough with its own weight. Which single moment in this story shatters the most once Tyrion is no longer the dwarf in the shadows, but a lion who fills the doorway? For one watcher, it might be the trial for Joffrey's murder, when the Hall turns on him not as a hated imp, but as a dangerous, cunning heir whose mind has always unsettled the court. For another, it could be the Battle of Blackwater, where a tall, armored Tyrion does not creep through hidden tunnels, but rides at the front line, wildfire burning behind his visor instead of beneath the city. As he grows up in this altered tale, every familiar scene becomes a test. Is he still the same man, or has the entire board shifted around him? In the world outside the castle walls, each viewer carries a different answer, a different wound, a different favorite betrayal. Some will imagine him as a ruthless tyrant, finally free of mockery, using the Lion's venture and Westerland's loyalties to carve out a personal kingdom. Others will see a heroic hand, the one hand of the king who understands both village hunger and royal arrogance, who continues to choose compromise where Tywin would choose steel. And there will be those who picture him as a forgotten middle son, eclipsed by Jaime's legend and Cersei's ambition, his brilliance drowned in wine and unspoken grief. Every one of those paths reveals something uncomfortable. Is this version of Tyrion better, or simply different? If he feels neither love nor acceptance because of his father's grief rather than his body, does that change the judgment that falls on him when he burns fleets, breaks chains, or bargains with dragons? This only grows when familiar relationships are turned and examined. Shae seeing a handsome patron instead of a broken outcast, Sansa facing a courteous lion who does not frighten the court, Daenerys weighing a proven captain instead of a desperate exile. Voices that linger in this realm of questions can remain and return. Further branches wait. Another Lannister choice in a dimly lit tower, a Targaryen child spared or slain before a city's gates, a single whispered prophecy that never reaches a frightened mother. The next tale will step back into that same world of banners and ash. But the name on the knife's edge will change, and with it, the fate of a house that once thought itself unassailable. Somewhere in that coming story, another lion, or perhaps a dragon, will face the same quiet demand Tyrion once heard in his father's hall. Prove worth, or be cast aside. The question is, whose face stands in the fire when that moment comes? Closing the book. Leaving the alternate Tyrion behind for now, somewhere in that coming story, another lion will rise, another dragon will fall, another village will burn beneath banners that promise honor and bring only ash. And yet, as the dust settles in this imagined Westeros, the tale must bend back toward the one already written. The sellsword captain of the Lion's venture, the feared tactician who humbled cities and unmade his father's legacy, begins to fade, and in his place stands the familiar figure, a sharp-tongued dwarf in a hostile castle, drinking to numb the fact that he feels neither love nor acceptance from the man whose name he bears. It is a difficult step, this turning away from the taller Tyrion who strode through Slaver's Bay with 1,000 men at his back. In this version, he wins the praise of hard-eyed captains. Instead of jeers from Lannister guards, he carries responsibilities that Tywin never intended him to hold, and his hands are stained with different kinds of blood. Letting him go means accepting that the canon Tyrion, smaller in stature and penned in by scorn, still carries all that potential inside a body Westeros mocks. As he grows up in the original story, the world narrows him to a single cruel word: imp. The small folk in the village whisper, the knights at the castle table smirk, his father uses him as a blunt instrument and then blames him when the blow rebounds. This only grows when he is dragged into the War of the Five Kings, when his dwarfism becomes not only a source of ridicule, but the excuse for a trial that treats him as a monster long before any evidence is heard. Yet stepping back from this alternate life is not an erasure. Instead, it becomes a lens. The Battle of Blackwater looks different when imagined with a respected warrior prince at the walls, and then again when remembered as it truly happened, a despised son, half-armored and bleeding, holding the line because no one else would. His journey across the narrow sea gains a second shadow when measured against the lion's venture, and he continues to feel sharper in canon precisely because the world never expected him to matter. In the end, that is the heart of this thought experiment. Change one birth, and a father's grief hardens along another path. Change one body, and the alliances of a continent shift. Change one heir, and the map of Westeros itself is redrawn. One different child in the birthing bed of Casterly Rock, and Daenerys' conquest, Tywin's fall, even the fate of the Iron Throne tilt on a new axis. Thanking those who have walked this long road with him means acknowledging that the journey was shared, through castle halls and ASOIAF harbours, through victories won by contract and by wildfire. Together, this imagined Tyrion has been raised, armed, exiled, and finally set beside a dragon queen, only to be set down again so the Cannon Man can take his place. So the question lingers, quiet but insistent, as the doors of this alternate history close. Was Tyrion Lannister's greatest strength ever truly his size, tall or small, or was it always his refusal to be only what the world saw when he entered the room?